Chapter 283. Imitating Jiang Qingzi, he cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Suddenly, Wuxia realized that although many members of the imperial clan and clans in Great Yan Dynasty practiced the art of cultivating qi, it seemed they did not have the concept of Dao League. It was only after he met Jiang Qingzi that Wuxia saw the standard Daoist robe, and heard Jiang Qingzi addressing himself as Daoist. He had only seen this gesture of cupping his fist and bowing to Jiang Qingzi. With a thought in his mind, Wuxia told Patriarch Jiang Yun about his identity, as well as the situation of Great Yan. However, as he had a feeling in his heart, he only gave a perfunctory explanation about the origin of Great Yan and the other kingdoms. With his current identity, age, and experience, it was impossible for him to know the detailed history of Great Yan and the other kingdoms. When Patriarch Jiang Yun heard that the planet where Great Yan and the other kingdoms were located was actually a rich and undeveloped planet, even with his cultivation of qi, he could not help but cry out in surprise. Especially when he heard that Han Shao Immortal had been chasing after Jiang Qingzi, forcing him to flee into the flaming nether ocean and discover the planet where Great Yan and the other kingdoms were located. Patriarch Jiang Yun's face turned unsightly. He snorted coldly. The white cloud wheeled rapidly around him as he nodded and said, "Han Shao, it looks like we have to put an end to this old freak. Over the last several dozens of years, many disciples of our sect were killed and had their souls disintegrated, and all the spirit-storing jade slips in our sect had exploded. I think it must be Han Zhao's doing." Wuxia dropped to his knees and bowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun, then said in a deep voice, "Patriarch, for the sake of the Emperor and ministers of Great Yan, and the millions upon millions of people, please lend us a helping hand. With what Han Shao and the other evil immortals have done, if Great Yan were to fall into their hands, all the people would suffer. With the current national strength of Great Yan, if Great Yan were to fall into the hands of Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect, the arrogance of these two evil sects would skyrocket, and it would be a disaster instead of a blessing for countless cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Jiang Yun gave the pile of 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies in front of him a look. He pointed his finger at them and said with a smile, "Wuxia, my young friend, is telling the truth. But what is the purpose of these Xiantian Gung metal treasures?" Reverently, Wuxia kowtowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun and said in a deep voice, "This is the gift to acknowledge me as your master. I do have a few enemies in Great Yan Dynasty, and in the three dynasties of Great Chu, Daqin and Great Wei, there are people who wish they could kill me. This is the gift of seeking protection." Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded and said, "All right, this old Taoist will accept you as my disciple. It would be impolite of me to refuse the gift of acknowledging you as my master." As for the so-called protection gift, there was no need to say anything more. As my disciple, if something happens, I will naturally step forward to protect him. There is no master in this world who would only step forward to protect his disciple after receiving a gift from him. There is no such logic in this world. Casually, Patriarch Jiang Yun pointed his finger at the air, and a gleaming rune spread out before his fingertip, followed by a crystal-clear chirp. "By Xia Qingwu, quickly come to me." Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out softly. Several hundred miles away, on the peak of a lofty mountain that was level with the ocean of clouds, a white cloud and a green mist soared into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, two slender figures clad in Taoist robes arrived next to Patriarch Jiang Yun. They were two beautiful middle-aged Taoist nuns, who looked dignified. Upon their arrival, they immediately sat cross-legged next to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Without hesitation, Jiang Qingzi dropped to his knees and kowtowed. "Little grandson Jiang Qing offers greeting, ancestral grandmothers." Wuxia gave the two middle-aged Taoist nuns a surprised look. It turned out that they were Patriarch Jiang Yun's wives. White Cloud Immortal Sect had 3 ancestral masters, and all 3 of them were experts of Heaven Immortal Realm. But Wuxia did not expect that these 3 ancestral masters were actually husband and wife. Basically, White Cloud Immortal Sect was a family-style immortal sect dominated by the Jiang clan. That was a good thing, as a sect like this would have a stronger cohesiveness, and the internal atmosphere would be more harmonious. Patriarch Jiang Yun pointed his finger at Wuxia and said with a smile, "Wuxia, the disciple I've just taken in, has a pretty good bone structure, and the cultivation technique he cultivates with 5 elements is very stable. He has a very solid foundation. Look at these 360 innate gold element treasures. They are a gift from this little boy to the 3 of us. Now, White Cloud Immortal Sect can have one more cornerstone treasure. And with that, those little boys will have a greater chance of transcending their heaven immortal tribulation in the future. Both middle-aged Taoist nuns gave Wuxia a glance, nodded and smiled at the same time. Clad in a green robe, Qingwu Immortal chuckled and said, "He is a pretty good boy." After giving Wuxia a careful look, Qingwu Immortal fished out 18 spirit talismans from a storage ring on her finger, and gave them to Wuxia. "As a senior, I can't take advantage of my juniors," said Qingwu. "Here are 18 spirit talismans for your protection. Although they are not as precious as these innate gold element treasures, they are still a token of my appreciation." Bai Xiao Immortal nodded her head and smiled. Without saying a word, she too fished out 18 glinting spirit talismans, and gave them to Wuxia. Wuxia was struck with wild joy. These spirit talismans were personally crafted by heaven immortals, and were at least 100 times more powerful than those talismans from Heavenly Spirit Sect. Each of these talismans had the mighty power to kill a nascent divinity cultivator in a split second. With these talismans, Wuxia would have many more ways to protect his life. Using the simplest words, Patriarch Jiang Yin described the reason why Wuxia came here. Qingwu Immortal frowned and said in a deep voice, "Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect have many conflicts with White Cloud Immortal Sect. Even if we can't kill them, we have to severely damage their vitality, so that they won't dare to confront us for the next 18,000 years. Since that old fogey Han Shao has the audacity to touch our disciples, we have to kill him this time." Slowly nodding his head, Patriarch Jiang Yin casually pointed his finger, and cut open the meridians on his left wrist. A large amount of pale golden blood sprayed out, and sprayed onto the 120 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies. He smiled faintly and said, "Initially, I did not have the confidence to kill that old fogey Han Shao, but with this supreme treasure, the chance has increased by 50%. By Xia Qingwu, don't waste any more time. Quickly refine them with your prime blood essence, and you'll be able to put them to basic use." Imitating Patriarch Jiang Yin, Bai Xia and Qingwu struck at the same time. A large amount of pale golden heaven immortal blood essence sprayed onto the grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies, each refining 120 pearls at the same time. Watching off to the side, Wuxia nodded his head inwardly. Although this set of pearls was not fully completed, it was, after all, an innate treasure with an extremely powerful power. By controlling them with the strength of a heaven immortal, they could barely unleash some of their power, but it was still too strenuous for them. With each of them controlling 1/3 of the pearls, they could unleash a greater power. As Patriarch Jiang Yin, Bai Xia, and Qingwu were husband and wife, and they had been cultivating together for tens of thousands of years, their minds had long been connected, and they were no different from a single person. Therefore, by refining them separately and using them, it was equal to one person using them. This set of grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies was given to the right person. Especially when they began to refine the pearls directly, Wuxia breathed out a heavy sigh of relief in his heart. With this set of innate pearls as his foundation, as long as he did not commit any disrespectful crime, such as deceiving his master and patriarch, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in White Cloud Immortal Sect, and he would no longer have to worry about being held back by others. After all, he was now Patriarch Jiang Yin's personal disciple, and his seniority in White Cloud Immortal Sect could be considered as frightening. After spending 6 hours, Patriarch Jiang Yin and the other 2 heaven immortals had completed the preliminary refining of the pearls. White clouds, white mists, and green mists were wheeling and coiling around them, while 360 pearls emanating a frigid aura were seen shuttling back and forth amidst the clouds and mists. They kept producing shrill whistling noises of piercing through the air, ripping one after another faint dark spatial cracks in the air. Patriarch Jiang Yin laughed delightedly and said, "Excellent. With this precious treasure, if we join hands, we can fight against a heaven immortal who is 3 tiers stronger than us. From now on, White Cloud Immortal Sect will have no more worries in Liyuan Galaxy. The three Heaven Immortals had a telepathic connection. Together, they opened their mouths and shot out a sword beam. One after another, the frigid pearls attached themselves to the sword beams, then disappeared into them in the blink of an eye. As the sword beams streaked across the sky, the speed of the sword beams skyrocketed by more than 10 times. And wherever they went, the void was torn open with a faintly discernible crack. Through the concealment of the sword beams, no one could discover the existence of the grand white spatial breaching pearls. They would only think that Patriarch Jiang Yin and the other two Heaven Immortals had obtained 3 mighty immortal swords. Patriarch Jiang Yin laughed delightfully. He gave Wuxia a loving look, nodded his head and said, "Good boy, good boy." After a brief moment of pondering, he smiled at Jiangqing Zi and said, "Well, Jiangqing, in the future, you can ask me directly about your homework. You and Wuqi are friends, and if you have to address him respectfully as Patriarch whenever you see him in the future, it will be hard for you." Wuqi gave a strange laugh, narrowing his eyes as he looked at Jiangqing Zi. Jiangqing Zi gave Wuqi a glare, then delightedly gave Patriarch Jiang Yin a few kowtows. Patriarch Jiang Yin gave a loud laugh. Suddenly, the sword beams wheeling above his head shot out, flying towards the lofty mountain where the teleportation formation was located. Above the teleportation formation, Patriarch Jiang Yun's 100 feet long white sword beam flashed and disappeared. After a full 15 minutes, the teleportation formation suddenly burst into a blinding light, and a white beam flew back at top speed. Following behind it were 3 old Taoists with white hair and beard, shrouded in immortal energies, and several hundred Taoists of all ages. Hastily, Wuqi used the mystic eyes of universe to examine these Taoists. He discovered that their aura was pure and not blurry, their eyes were as clear as water, and their bodies were shrouded in pure energies. Indeed, they were cultivators from the Righteous League who had cultivated both energy and mind to a certain level. Only then did he breathe out a sigh of relief. These Taoists should be the people from the Tranquil Vimla sect, who had formed an alliance with White Cloud Immortal sect for several tens of thousands of years. The 3 old Taoists flying at the forefront were the 3 ancestral masters of Tranquil Vimla sect, Qing Xian, Qing Shen and Qing Yi. These 3 old Taoists were actually blood brothers. Many years ago, they had obtained a Taoist lineage with an immortal fate together, and after achieving a certain level of cultivation base, they founded the Tranquil Vimla sect, which had been developing in Liyuan Galaxy for several tens of thousands of years. Patriarch Jiang Yin rose to his feet, together with Bai Xia and Qing Wu, the 2 Heaven Immortals standing behind him, greeted them and said, "Fellow Taoists, thank you for your hard work." The 3 old Taoists, Qing Xian, Qing Shen and Qing Yi, who looked almost identical, quickly cupped their fists and said, "You flatter us. Fellow Taoists, this is an opportunity for Tranquil Vimla sect to develop and grow stronger. How could we say we are tired?" Wuqi and Jiangqing Zi rose to their feet hastily, following behind Patriarch Jiang Yin as they cupped their fists and bowed to the 3 old Taoists. After bowing and returning the greetings according to their seniority, Patriarch Jiang Yin nodded and said, "Just now I sent a message with my flying sword. Fellow Taoists, do you know what happened in that room? We must strike with a thunderous strike, and make those few Taoists stay in that place. Otherwise it will bring us many troubles in the future." Qing Xian nodded and said, "All right. I've brought the sect-guarding treasure, the heart-calming chime." With a wave of his hand, a clump of green mist sprayed out from Qing Xian's palm. A tiny jade chime, about the size of a toddler's head, simple in design and glinting brightly, hovered above his palm. Patriarch Jiang Yin laughed and said, "Excellent. White cloud sky veiling flag rise." Then he casually extended his hand and made a grabbing motion. Immediately, the ocean of clouds that stretched for several million miles around the lofty peak began to roll and roll. In just a blink of an eye, all the clouds quickly gathered in one spot, transforming into a tiny white spirit flag, about 1 foot in circumference, and fell into Patriarch Jiang Yun's palm. Surprisingly, the boundless ocean of clouds was actually the White Cloud Sky Veiling Flag, the sect-guarding treasure of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Several hundred beams of cloud flew up from several dozens of lofty peaks in all directions, flying towards them. The elite cultivators of White Cloud Immortal Sect had turned out in full strength. Chapter 284. The teleportation formation flickered with a bright light, as Chi-Chi, a group of nearly 1,000 cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, walked out from it. Looking at the sealed cave walls, and then at the countless restrictive runes on them, Patriarch Jiang Yun could not help but smile and say, "Wuqi, my disciple, you are really cautious." Shaking his head, Patriarch Jiang Yun had no idea how to evaluate Wuqi. He recalled the time when Patriarch Jiang Yun was still a cultivator of Jin Dan sect. With just a flying sword, he had stirred up troubles all over the world, and was beaten up badly by the enemies. It seemed that at that time, Patriarch Jiang Yun did not have the awareness to prepare a few escape routes. Only heaven knew what was in Wuqi's mind, as he had prepared so many escape routes, and even built a grand universal teleportation formation. Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the three old Taoists, had their eyes fixed on the spatial breaching spirit gold in the teleportation formation, not even blinking. Spatial breaching spirit gold. So much spatial breaching spirit gold. Even for a sect, this was a very valuable strategic treasure. With these spatial breaching spirit gold, the sect would be able to save a lot of energy stones when building the teleportation formation. Similar to White Cloud Immortal Sect, Tranquil Vimla Sect had a planet under their control, with important strongholds of various sizes scattered all over the planet. Teleportation formations were built between each stronghold for their disciples to travel back and forth. If they could have so much spatial breaching spirit gold, Tranquil Vimla Sect would be able to save millions of energy stones every year. How many disciples could they provide with 1 million energy stones to improve their cultivation base and cultivation speed? And how many more spirit pills, magical treasures, and the like? Qing Xian cleared his throat and was about to say something, but Wu Qi had already bowed to the old Taoists and said with a faint smile, "Seniors, in Great Yan Dynasty, in the territory of Duke Yanlu, Wu Qi's sworn brother, Lu Chengfeng, there is an ore vein of spatial breaching spirit gold. It has a very rich reserve. Not to mention White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Even if there were 10 times more immortal sects, it would still be enough." Chi-Chi, who was crowded in the small cave, gasped. "A ore vein of spatial breaching spirit gold? Did they hear wrongly?" They all knew that several decades ago, the treasure-gathering pavilion of Liyuan Galaxy auctioned a piece of spatial breaching spirit gold, which was sold at a sky-high price of 130,000 upper-grade energy stones. 130,000 upper-grade energy stones. However, judging from the fact that Wu Qi had used over 1,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold to build this grand universal teleportation formation, it seemed that there really was such a mine. This planet was indeed a priceless planet. If White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect could occupy this priceless planet and use it as their secret stronghold, the prosperity of both sects would be just around the corner. Taking a deep breath, Patriarch Jiang Yun suddenly said, "The spiritual energy here is several times denser than in my White Cloud Peak." Sure enough, it was an undeveloped treasure planet. However, Wu Qi, you said that there are immortal cave residences here? Hastily, Wu Qi took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "Currently Great Wei and Great Zhao are fighting for the immortal cave residences, and it has dragged all 6 dynasties into the war. If not for the sudden arrival of Han Shao and the other evil immortals, perhaps the 6 dynasties would have already fought to the death for that relic, and blood would have flowed like a river. Before Han Shao and the other evil immortals arrived, the 6 dynasties had actually lost 1 million soldiers." 1 million soldiers. Qing Xian murmured. "Most of them are cultivators of Xiantian realm." Wu Qi forced a smile, nodded his head and said, "Yes, at least the soldiers of Great Yan's Blood Swallow Army, Black Swallow Army, and other elite armies are all Xiantian realm warriors." Patriarch Jiang Yun fell silent. Bai Xia and Qing Wu were speechless. The 3 old Taoists Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi were speechless, and the nearly 1,000 elite cultivators from both immortal sects were speechless. More than 1 million Xiantian cultivators. Apart from this kind of treasured planet with abundant spirit qi and natural treasures everywhere, no other place could cultivate so many Xiantian cultivators. Both White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect were guarded by 3 patriarchs of Heaven Immortal Realm. But if both immortal sects were to combine all their Xiantian cultivators, could there be more than 100,000 people? It was not that they did not have enough disciples with sufficient foundation and talent, but they simply could not afford to raise so many disciples. Shaking his head, Patriarch Jiang Yun said in a deep voice, "There are relics of immortals here, and the natural energy here is so strong, as well as so many natural treasures. Admittedly, this planet is huge. But the situation here is still a little strange. When we are done with this matter, we must find out the exact situation of this planet." The group of Heaven Immortals nodded their heads. Under Wu Qi's guidance, they stepped into the short-distance teleportation formation which Wu Qi had prepared in his cave abode, and teleported to a forest that was only about 100 miles away from Mo City. Patriarch Jiang Yun unleashed the white cloud skyveiling flag. A faint layer of cloud rose from the ground, enveloping everyone within it. To Wu Qi's surprise, the faint layer of cloud could actually isolate the probing of divine will. Even with the unique divine will of his nascent divinity, he could not penetrate through it. Under the cover of the cloud, the group flew up close to the ground, flying quickly towards Mo City. At last, they were less than 10 miles away from Mo City. Up in the sky, a huge metal city was madly engulfing the raging flame from the Earth's core. Countless runes were blinking on the surface of the city, while several thousand huge armaments from Mo sect were shooting out beams of blinding light into the sky. The bodies of Han Shao Immortal and the other evil immortals were faintly visible in midair, dodging the attacks of these beams with ease. No matter how hard the disciples of Mo sect who were controlling these armaments tried, they just could not lock down the whereabouts of these immortals. All of a sudden, Zhenmu's sovereign laughed ferociously. With a wave of his hand, a green wooden stake, about 1 mile in diameter and 100 miles in length, smashed down from the sky amidst a very strong green thunderbolt, smashing viciously onto the defensive barrier of Mo City. The green wooden stake exploded with a loud boom, filling the sky with green flames and green thunderbolts. The defensive barrier of Mo City was shattered layer by layer, and on top of a city wall located at the northwest corner of the city, a large number of runes exploded abruptly, wounding several dozens of cultivators from 6 dynasties who were waiting solemnly in the vicinity. Zhenmu's sovereign let out a wild laugh. Countless tiny wisterias stretched out from his body, drilling into the woods within 1,000 miles circumference, crazily extracting the enormous aura of wood element found in the woods, injecting it into his body and transforming it into his own immortal energy. With a wave of his hand, 7 to 8 huge green wooden stakes smashed viciously onto the defensive barrier of Mo City once again. Right at this moment, Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign struck at the same time. Laughing out loud, they transformed into a pair of transparent flaming men, swinging down flames that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth. All of a sudden, the wood element energies burst into flames, enveloping the entire Mo City in a blink of an eye, burning the defensive barrier of Mo City, and causing it to explode. A threatening heat swept across the entire city, melting some of the weaker metal plates in the city, while some of the metal components were spraying out large amounts of white molten iron like the eruption of a volcano. Right after the wood element energies were completely burned out, and the frighteningly high temperature was not over yet, Han Shao Immortal had already sprung down from the sky while laughing evilly. A large sheet of cold air enveloped the entire Mo City in an instant. The city, which was still expanding because of the high temperature, was instantly frozen by the frighteningly low temperature, causing it to shrink abruptly. The extreme temperature and extreme cold changed in an instant. Countless jarring noises of explosion kept ringing out, as countless cracks appeared on the metallic body of Mo City. After that, White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady plunged down from the sky while laughing wildly. With a sway of his body, White Ghost Immortal abruptly transformed into a blurry shadow, smashing forcefully onto the last remaining defensive barrier of Mo City. Jarring noises of slicing and slicing rang out, as countless pitch-black ghost claws emerged out of thin air, spraying dense dark smoke as they came tearing at Emo City. Each of these ghost claws measured several tens of feet in circumference, and with just a casual strike, they could rip a lofty mountain to shreds. Amidst the tearing of countless ghost claws, the defensive barrier of Emo City creaked as if it could not withstand the heavy load. A very long and deep crack was torn open from the middle of the city, and it looked like it was about to be torn apart by White Ghost Immortal. Meanwhile, Ghost Lady let out a wild laugh. 9 blurry female shadows hovered around her, letting out shrill cries as they casually thrust their hands down. Immediately, countless spears and flying daggers made from white bones shot out in all directions, bringing with them dense dark smoke as they plunged down, filling the sky above Emo City with sparks and sparks. Inside the city, Yin Dan and the others could only stand there blankly. Their divine will could not lock down on the figures of 6 evil immortals, and they could not find out where the real bodies of their enemies were. There was no way they could launch any attacks. In addition to wasting true essence in vain, there was no other use for him to recklessly increase the power of the Forbidden Law curse. Heaven immortals and cultivators were existences on 2 completely different levels. When one could not even locate the real bodies of the enemies, how could one attack them? Even Xiangyu, who nearly could not restrain himself from unleashing the banner of Qiyu, could only stand there blankly. Even if he did use the banner of Qiyu, with his current cultivation base, it was impossible for him to trap 6 evil immortals with it. It would still not help the situation, and would instead attract the attention of others. Up in the sky, 6 evil immortals let out wild roars once again, unleashing another wave of attacks that rained down like a raging storm. Emo City was shaking violently. Countless cracks had appeared on its surface, and the earth core fire pillar underneath had turned dim and lightless. When the 6 evil immortals were attacking the real body of Emo City, they had also cut off the earth energy veins and fire veins underneath, gradually weakening the supply of fire energy to Emo City. Therefore, the defensive mechanism of Emo City had become weaker and weaker. In the end, almost any casual attack from them could break a large chunk of the defensive mechanism. Amidst jarring whistling noises, another wave of attacks came whistling down. While laughing strangely, Zhenmu's sovereign threw down 18 huge green wooden pillars in a row, while Han Shao Immortal had transformed into a clump of cold air, getting ready to give Emo City another blow. At the same time, Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign teleported right above Zhenmu Sovereign. Both brothers opened their mouths and shot out 2 pale blue flame beams, which shrouded Zhenmu Sovereign's entire body in just a blink of an eye. Han Shao Immortal raised his head in horror, and happened to see Zhenmu Sovereign howling miserably as he was engulfed by the blue flame, while a large patch of skin on his back was burned into ashes in a blink of an eye. Therefore, even though Zhenmu Sovereign's cultivation base was stronger than Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign, he was still badly burned by the prime true flame unleashed by them, and was severely wounded on the spot. White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady let out a strange laugh at the same time. Suddenly, the attack that they had been accumulating for a long time smashed heavily onto Han Shao Immortal's body. Han Shao Immortal reacted very quickly. When he saw Zhenmu Sovereign was attacked, he immediately unleashed the purple bamboo silk flowers. However, as both White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady had joined forces, their cultivation base was almost equal to his, and they even launched a sneak attack, landing a heavy blow on Han Shao Immortal's back and sending him flying down. Boom! Boom! 2 muffled booms rang out. Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal crashed through the last layer of Emo City's defensive mechanism, smashing onto the metallic ground in a sorry state. Chi-Chi coughed out a mouthful of blood. Zhenmu Sovereign's blood burst into flames when it came into contact with the wind, while Han Shao Immortal simply coughed out a stream of pitch-black ghost aura. Up in the sky, Black Feather Sovereign and the other 3 joined forces, charging down while laughing hideously. Kill them. Then, Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect will share this priceless planet. Not allowing Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal to flee, a storm of attacks came whistling down, engulfing the entire Emo City. Chapter 285. Kill. 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 Black Feather Sovereign, Inferno Sovereign, White Ghost Immortal, and Ghost Lady let out a loud roar at the same time, using all the methods available to them to fly down. When they were besieging Mo City just now, they had already reached a secret agreement with Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal. They would join hands and kill both of them, while the two sects would share this priceless planet. As the ancestral masters of the evil immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy, these four men had been in frequent contact with each other, and their relationship was much stronger than that of Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal. In their opinion, these two itinerant cultivators, who did not have any disciples to provide for, were just cutting a piece of meat from their sections. The priceless planet was priceless, and half of the profits should not be left to two itinerant cultivators. Therefore, they quickly reached an agreement. They would kill Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal, while the other two sects would share all the profits on this planet equally. 4 against 2, and with a sneak attack from the back, they would definitely win. Sure enough, Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal were killed by them with just one strike, and were severely wounded. As Zhenmu Sovereign cultivated with Wood Element technique, his body was invaded by Black Feather Sovereign, and Inferno Sovereign's Prime True Flame, which nearly set his internal organs on fire. In just a blink of an eye, about 50% of the immortal energy in his body was burned away by the invading fire. As a result, his overall strength was at most 50% of his usual strength, which was on par with the others. On the other hand, Han Shao Immortal's body was invaded by an immense ghost aura, which kept devouring his prime energy essence. He was also severely wounded, and his cultivation base was weakened by about 30%. However, Han Shao Immortal's cultivation base was far weaker than Zhenmu Sovereign, and with his cultivation base weakened by 30%, he was no match for either White Ghost Immortal or Ghost Lady. Staring at the four former allies who were swooping down from above, Han Shao Immortal cried out sternly, "Old fogey Zhenmu, fight with all your might, or you will really die here." Then, he opened his mouth and spat out his purple bamboo flower basket in a flustered and exasperated manner. Countless colorful petals danced and danced in the air, while the flower basket shot up into the sky and exploded amidst Black Feather Sovereign and the other three. The flower basket was a lower-grade immortal item, and for the sake of escaping, Han Shao Immortal had no choice but to explode it. The sliver of his primordial spirit hidden in the blossom's orchid was destroyed, and his primordial spirit was immediately heavily injured. Large amounts of black blood spurted out from his 7 apertures. A blinding light flashed, and hundreds of huge flowers appeared in the void at the same time. An enormous immortal force surged out, and countless razor-sharp 5-colored halos wrapped around Black Feather Sovereign and his companions, killing them at the same time. Black Feather Sovereign and the other 4 evil immortals coughed out a mouthful of blood at the same time. The explosion of the immortal items on their bodies had even exposed their bones. Han Shao Immortal detonated his immortal item in a moment of desperation, and the power of the explosion was not to be underestimated. Even though the 4 of them had made preparations before the sneak attack, they were still riddled with scars from the explosion, and their vitality was greatly damaged. Ghost Lady's cultivation base was the weakest among them. Her arm was blown off, and her chest, which was shaped like a beautiful woman's, was blown away, revealing a large patch of white bones. It was a beautiful contrast with the white bones of the other half of her body. The scene was extremely miserable. Ghost Lady let out a shrill cry as she flew into a rage. Suddenly, the 9 indistinct female ghosts around her became clear. Obviously, they were 9 ferocious and frightening evil ghosts with green hair and red eyes. Pointing her finger at Han Shao Immortal, Ghost Lady roared furiously, "Kill him! Tear him into pieces! Devour all his energy essence!" 9 evil ghosts leaped down from the sky, while Ghost Lady curled up her body and leaped forward. 3 feet long sharp claws stretched out from both of her hands, grabbing towards Han Shao Immortal in a messy manner. Han Shao Immortal coughed out a mouthful of blood. After exploding his immortal item to buy himself a brief moment to catch his breath, his body swayed and attempted to flee with teleportation. However, before he could flee, Zhenmu Sovereign had already rolled his strange eyes, as a sticky green beam shot out from the erect eye between his brows and smashed viciously onto Han Shao Immortal's back. Han Shao Immortal's body trembled, and abruptly turned a pale green color. Zhenmu Sovereign grabbed Han Shao Immortal's neck, then casually threw him towards the 4 evil immortals and 9 evil ghosts who were swooping down from the sky. Zhenmu's sovereign roared sternly. Brother Han Shao, I have no choice but to trouble you to fight for a slim chance of survival for me today. Leave a thread of your soul for reincarnation. And in the future, I'll definitely find your reincarnation and guide you to continue your cultivation of immortality. If you reincarnate as a man, I'll take you as my adopted son. If you reincarnate as a woman, I'll marry you as my concubine, and I'll never wrong you. Following Zhenmu's sovereign's almost shameless shout, Han Shao Immortal was thrown high up into the sky in a flustered and exasperated manner. From the erect eye between Zhenmu's sovereign's brows, a strong green beam kept shooting out and injecting into Han Shao Immortal's body. All of a sudden, Han Shao Immortal's body began to swell up, turning into a round ball. A dense green gleam burst out from his body, and a large amount of thick green smoke that came with a pungent odor burst out from within. Yan Dan and the rest of the people turned into bright beams and fled into the distance. With a complicated expression, they looked at these heaven immortals who had suddenly turned against each other. Fight, fight with all your might. It will be the best if all of you are dead. After fleeing for several hundred miles at full speed, Yan Dan and the rest of the people turned to look back at Mo City, which was now enshrouded in a strong light. Only then did they realize that it was a very childish idea to fight against heaven immortals with the combined forces of 6 dynasties. Heaven immortals were not existences that could be resisted by human beings. Only heaven immortals could fight against heaven immortals. Immediately, the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties turned their gazes towards the cultivators and demon kings who had the most hope to break through the realm of heaven immortal in a short period of time. Above Mo City, Han Shao Immortal's body suddenly exploded. A green mist towered into the sky, as countless thick green smoke that came with a pungent odor of grass, and would transformed into countless tiny threads that shot up into the sky amidst the green light. Caught unprepared by the attack, Black Feather Sovereign and his companions had their bodies riddled with countless tiny holes that looked like sieves. These tiny holes were not strong enough to kill a heaven immortal, but they were enough to weaken a great deal of their immortal energy, causing a great loss to their prime energy essence. It was especially true for the 9 evil ghosts, as their bodies were riddled with holes by the green threads. Abruptly, they exploded into 9 clumps of dense smoke and returned to Ghost Lady's body. Ghost Lady roared furiously in anger. She waved her hand casually, unleashing countless spears and flying daggers condensed from white bones to shoot down. Zhenmu's sovereign staggered, as he coughed out another mouthful of burning blood. He glared at the 4 evil immortals who were shooting down against the green light, grinned hideously and said, "If you want to kill me and reap all the benefits, you will have to be alive first. Hee brother Han Shao, have a safe journey. I'll let you bastards witness the power of the Greenwood soul-seizing fiend eye that I've refined for over 37,000 years. Hee for the sake of this priceless planet, I'll risk it all." Suddenly, the erect eye between Zhenmu's sovereign's brows exploded, completely and utterly, without leaving any trace behind. Zhenmu's sovereign let out a miserable howl, as countless wounds appeared all over his body like an old tree peeling off its bark, while a large amount of blood sprayed out from the wounds. Suddenly, the towering green light beam shrank inwards, wrapping tightly around the 4 evil immortals like a silkworm in a cocoon, wrapping them tightly in the core of the light ball. On the surface of the light ball, one could vaguely see the terrified and despairing figure of Han Shao Immortal. However, the figure only swayed a few times in the light ball, before it suddenly transformed into a clump of green mist and fused into the light ball. The blood that flowed out from the explosion of Zhenmu's sovereign's erect eye shot up into the air and fused into the light ball. The flying daggers and spears unleashed by Ghost Lady kept hitting the surface of the light ball, causing large sheets of strong light to burst out. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she just could not break through the light ball. The other 3 evil immortals were also attacking the light ball with all their might. However, the light ball was formed from the fiend eye which Zhenmu's sovereign had refined for over 30,000 years, as well as all the blood essence of Han Shao Immortal. How could they break through it so easily? While laughing ferociously, Zhenmu's sovereign quickly performed some incantation gestures with both hands. Slowly, a wooden blade with an ancient and heavy shape glinting with a green gleam, slowly flew out from between his brows. Upon the appearance of the wooden blade, Zhenmu Sovereign's body quickly withered, as if all the blood essence in his body was sucked dry by the blade. Staring at the four evil immortals, who were struggling and roaring crazily in the light ball, Zhenmu Sovereign laughed wildly and said, "I've sacrificed 70% of my blood essence, risking my cultivation base to drop back to the threshold of 36th tier heaven immortal. I'm going to use this immortal blade made from the spirit heart of a 10,000 years old man-eating tree to kill all of you." Zhenmu Sovereign cried out sternly, "As long as I have this priceless planet, everything will be worth it. I can establish my own sect here, and I can do whatever I want here. With the power of this priceless planet, I have a chance to become a gold immortal. Ha ha ha. Once I become a gold immortal, ha ha ha." Zhenmu Sovereign, who was waving his arms and legs wildly, held the wooden blade in his hand, and chopped off his left arm and both of his legs. In the blink of an eye, the bizarre wooden blade had absorbed all of his broken arms and legs, leaving nothing behind, not even a speck of ashes. Zhenmu Sovereign laughed ferociously, staring at the four panic-stricken evil immortals and said, "You only know that I, Old Mu, have 1 foot in the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal. But you have no idea why I, an 18th tier heaven immortal, who has ascended to the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal at almost the same time as all of you. But why is my cultivation base so much faster than all of you?" Waving the wooden blade in his hand, Zhenmu Sovereign grinned coldly and said, "This is the answer. I, Old Mu, was lucky enough to obtain the legacy of a demon immortal who had fallen in the ancient times, and was also cultivating a wood element cultivation technique. This is the soul-seizing demon blade, made by that 18th tier demon immortal using the spirit heart of a 10,000 years old man-eating tree. Hee, an 18th tier demon immortal." Then he waved the blade casually, transforming it into a fierce green beam that shot out and smashed viciously onto the light ball. As if it was made of crystal, the light ball shattered into pieces amidst a jarring noise of explosion. The four evil immortals who were trapped in the light ball let out a miserable howl, as their bodies were nearly ripped to shreds by the shattered light ball. Countless of their bones were broken, and all their muscles were ripped to shreds. A huge amount of blood kept bursting out from their wounds. The wooden blade whistled through the air, piercing through Black Feather Sovereign's forehead and coming out from the back of his head. The soul-seizing demon blade had shattered Black Feather Sovereign's immortal soul, killing him completely. Black Feather Sovereign's body shriveled up quickly, as all his blood essence was sucked dry. Then it was Inferno Sovereign's turn. Not waiting for him to exercise an immortal technique and flee, the wooden blade came shooting over and pierced through his head. After that, the blade beam flashed again, and all four of White Ghost Immortal's limbs were chopped off by the green blade beam. His body fell heavily to the ground, and his blood sprayed everywhere. Zhenmu Sovereign coughed out a mouthful of blood. Then he staggered and drifted towards Ghost Lady, who was lying on the ground and unable to move. Laughing hideously, he said, "Ghost Lady, don't scare me with that hideous look. I know you can reverse your cultivation technique and regenerate your fleshly body. Come, transform into the appearance of a beautiful girl. Today, I'll use you as my cultivation vessel to heal my wounds." Grabbing the half-human, half-ghost Ghost Lady, Zhenmu Sovereign laughed wildly and said, "Old Mu, today, in front of White Ghost Immortal, I'm going to torture you as my cultivation vessel. Hee, how dare you to have evil thoughts towards me. But little did you expect that I actually have this trick up my sleeves." A miserable howl was heard, as 3 sword beams, 1 green and 2 white, came shooting over and piercing through Zhenmu Sovereign's forehead, heart and dantian. The grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies hidden in the sword beams vibrated at a high frequency, producing tiny spatial cracks and ripping Zhenmu Sovereign's immortal soul to shreds. Suddenly, a loud chime rang out, as a large sheet of white clouds rushed out from the ground. Nearly 1,000 cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect arrived on the clouds. Immediately, both Ghost Lady and White Ghost Immortal let out a bitter, despairing laugh. A blinding light flickered, as both of them self-detonated at the same time. Patriarch Jiang Yin reacted very quickly. The white cloud sky-veiling flag in his hand transformed into a vast ocean of clouds and rolled out, wrapping around the enormous impact produced by the self-detonation of both Ghost Lady and White Ghost Lady, then quickly sent them up into the sky, allowing them to explode in the sky. A loud boom echoed out as a blinding light sprinkled down from the sky, and even the planet under their feet trembled a few times. All 6 evil immortals were killed, and not even their ashes were left. Looking at the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties in the distance, Patriarch Jiangyun nodded and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, can you talk with me? Both White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect have the intention to build their headquarters here. What do you think?" The emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties looked at each other speechlessly, sighing in their hearts at the same time. Chapter 286. In the main meeting hall of Ming Fortress, 6 heaven immortals, including Patriarch Jiangyun, sat high up in the main seat, shrouded in immortal energies. The faint immortal pressure emanating from these 6 heaven immortals made everyone in the hall hold their breaths, not daring to show any disrespect. It was especially true for the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties. After facing the terrifying strength of the 6 evil immortals, they truly understood the gap between immortals and mortals. By relying on various divine abilities, mystic arts, or powerful natal magical treasures, the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties might be able to fight against a single heaven immortal, but when 6 heaven immortals joined forces, they could instantly destroy the allied army formed by all the cultivators of the 6 dynasties. Moreover, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect had brought nearly 200 nascent divinity cultivators, and over 2,000 nascent soul cultivators. Unlike the cultivators from the 6 dynasties, the cultivators from the 2 great immortal sects had been hanging around Liyuan Galaxy for a long time, fighting with other cultivators for various reasons. Therefore, they were more experienced, and their cultivation bases were more profound. Under the circumstance where the cultivators from the 2 great immortal sects had the same cultivation base, they could easily fight against 2 or even 3 cultivators from the 6 dynasties. Before this war, the cultivators of the 6 nations basically did not have much battle experience. For example, many of the imperial sinecures of Great Yan's Cloud Swallow Pavilion had smoothly cultivated to nascent soul realm, living a luxurious life and never stained their hands with blood. For example, Gigazi, Mod, and Sun Kuang, who had the status of imperial advisor, had never fought before the Great War of Meng Mountains. As for the cultivators of the 2 great immortal sects, they were fighting with other cultivators, they were fighting with demons, they were fighting with demon beasts, they were fighting with other cultivators, they were fighting with demons, they were fighting with demon beasts. For example, Jiangqingzi was always out and about, searching for various spirit herbs and rare treasures for White Cloud Immortal Sect. He even put his life on the line, which gave him a rich experience in fighting. That was the reason why he was able to escape from the pursuit of heaven immortals. Putting aside the 6 heavenly immortals, just the ordinary disciples of the 2 immortal sects were enough to completely suppress Yen Dan and the others. Unless they used their natal magic treasures, such as the Cauldron of Yu, the Imperial Jade Seal, and the Disc of Heavenly Tao of Reincarnation, they would not be able to fight against the disciples of the 2 great immortal sections. But once the 6 heavenly immortals joined the battle, the emperors and ministers of the 6 states would be instantly wiped out. Patriarch Jiangyun and the other heaven immortals sat quietly in the hall, not saying a word, while the eldest disciple standing next to them did not say a word either. Yen Dan and the others exchanged looks and discussed various issues with their courtiers through voice transmissions from time to time. The eyes of Yen Dan, Chu Ping, Yingzheng Weiwuji Tianwan Zhaosheng, and the other emperors of the 6 dynasties were flickering. They quickly exchanged glances with their allies, but would never look into the eyes of the emperors of the enemy dynasties. The atmosphere in the hall was very strange, oppressive, and extremely mysterious. However, at this very moment, Wuxia was seen flying at top speed in the sky above the Great Eastern Ocean with a smile on his face, leading a group of nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Using divine abilities, a few nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect were bringing Wuxia flying forward at top speed. As a result, Their flying speed was extremely fast. It did not take them long to cross the ocean, and they came to the sky above a huge island located in the middle of the ocean. The island measured over 10,000 miles in circumference and was surrounded by a cluster of islands of various sizes. The edges of each island were as steep as blades, and the main structure of the islands was made of grayish-white rocks. There were very few plants and soil on the islands, while deserts and the Gobi Desert occupied more than half of the island's surface area. It was the same situation for the surrounding clusters of islands, and it was the same for the big island in the middle. On the cliffs that stood several tens of thousands of feet tall at the edge of the island, one after another, huge nests were dug out. From the bottom of the cliffs, from the height close to the ocean, all the way to the entrance of the nests, a steep staircase was dug out. When Wuxia and his company arrived, they saw a large number of longbow people climbing up the cliffs along the staircase, throwing one big fish after another into the nests. Some female Longbow Kingdom warriors walked out of the nest with broadswords in their hands. They squatted at the entrance of the nest and cut off the heads of the big fishes with one clean slash, then cut open their stomachs, picking out their internal organs and throwing them into the ocean below. Using thick ropes, they strung up these big fish, which measured from several tens of feet to several hundred feet long, and hung them outside the nests. A large number of iron pillars were nailed on the ground at the entrance, and the big fish were hung on these iron pillars with ropes. The ocean breeze blew past, swaying the big fish that were cut into halves, slamming into the cliffs and producing loud banging noises. As far as the eye could see, the cliffs were densely covered with big fish, some of which had been dried by the ocean breeze and the scorching sun. Apart from the big fish, there were also the carcasses of big sea beasts and sea turtles, all of which were the food stored by these longbow people. Under the cliffs, some longbow people had exercised their innate divine ability, growing their bodies to several thousand feet tall. They stood naked in the ocean, laughing aloud as they chased after the big fish. The water level was only up to their waists, and when they ran and chased after the big fish, they brought up a great amount of water splashes, which slapped against the surface of the water and produced loud booms. All of a sudden, a huge whale, over 2,000 feet long, leaped up from the ocean. A longbow man laughed wildly, and with a sway of his body, he came before the whale in a blink of an eye. Two huge fists were thrust out along with a frightening wind-splitting noise, smashing viciously onto the whale's head and killing it on the spot. Complacently, the longbow man picked up the whale's tail and dragged it towards the nests on the cliffs. Behind the cliffs, in a small desert about 180 miles inland, a group of longbow people, who stood several tens of feet tall and looked like children, were playing a dangerous game. They were laughing and teasing a group of gigantic double-tailed poisonous scorpions and pitch-black poisonous desert vipers. The enraged poisonous scorpions and snakes spurted out large amounts of venom. The pitch-black venom splashed on the ground, corroding the sand and causing a sizzling noise. After a while, the group of young men from Longbow Kingdom became impatient. Suddenly, they pulled up several tens of feet wide boulders from the ground and threw them forcefully towards those unlucky scorpions and venomous snakes, smashing them into meat paste. Laughing and joking, the group of youngsters spread out in groups of 3 to 5. Soon, they formed teams of men and women, found a cool spot in the desert with their backs to the sun, took off their clothes, and began the most primitive activity of human reproduction. When Wuxia scanned these youngsters with his divine will, he could not help but give them a few glances in surprise. Judging from the aura of their life force, they were roughly equivalent to 7 to 8 years old human children. Yet, they had already begun to carry on the family line. The strong life force of Longbow people was indeed extraordinary, as they had already matured at the age of 7 to 8 years old. Surrounding Wuxia, over 20 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect were treading on clouds and hovering above those longbow people, who were busy hunting the fishes. There were about 300,000 longbow people living here, and they could be considered as the strongest tribe among all the tribes in Longbow Kingdom. According to those slave traders, the entire population of Longbow Kingdom was about 3 to 4 million people. Looking at the longbow people down below, Wuxia cupped his fist at those nascent divinity cultivators and said, "Senior brothers, Please help me capture 9,900 longbow people alive for Wuxia. Among them, 4,900 will be men, while the other 5,000 will be women. All of them must be adults. After capturing them alive, I'll force them to open up their souls, so I can plant a soul-controlling spell in them. While smiling and bowing at these nascent divinity cultivators, Wuxia handed each of them a storage bag. The storage bag was about the size of 5 rooms, and it contained nothing but energy stones, millions of energy stones. When these nascent divinity cultivators gave the storage bag a glance with their divine will, their expressions changed instantly, and their faces were immediately filled with smiles. A peak-stage nascent divinity Taoist from Tranquil Vimla sect smiled and said, "Junior brother Wuxia is too courteous, too courteous. Senior and junior brothers, we are ordered by our masters to help junior brother Wuxia capture longbow people alive, so that they can serve as the patrolling guards for junior brother Wuxia's cave abode in the future. Everyone, please work harder, and don't choose those useless people. It's best if they are those longbow people who have formed the Jindan Alliance." The group of nascent divinity cultivators roared with laughter, then exercised their magic and divine abilities, transforming into wild gusts of light and shadow that blotted the sky and blotted the earth as they plunged down. The longbow people down below were struck with terror, and they began to give out urgent warning cries. However, all the cultivators who came with Wuxia were the most elite nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Among them, there were 18 peak-stage nascent soul cultivators. Although longbow people lived a long life and possessed amazing innate talents, the thunder tribulation they had to face when breaking through their cultivation base was extremely powerful. Among the over 300,000 longbow people down below, only a few hundred of them had formed the Jindan Alliance. How could they be a match for so many nascent divinity cultivators? Countless longbow men cried out in alarm as they were pulled up into the air by numerous giant hands that flickered with bright lights. Then, a mighty divine will forcibly split their souls, allowing Wuxia to leave a soul-controlling spell in their souls. In just one day and one night, Wuxia had gathered a total of 9,900 longbow people. Together with the 100 longbow people in his spirit breeding ring, he now had a total of 10,000 longbow people. As long as they consumed the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup, and transcended their Jindan thunder tribulation with Wuxia's help, the heavenly 100 spirit warring formation formed by 10,000 longbow people would have the power to fight against a heaven immortal. Even if they were not the match for a heaven immortal, once any nascent divinity cultivator, or even a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator, were trapped in the formation, they would definitely die. The heavenly 100 spirit warring formation had a scale of 10,000 longbow people. Any more and it would only disturb the operation of the formation, and it would not be able to form a complete whole. Wuxia was confident that once all these longbow people had their cultivation base improved to nascent soul realm in the future, the heavenly 100 spirit warring formation would have the overall strength to kill a heaven immortal. He had subdued 9,900 longbow people here, and on the other side, the cultivators from the 2 immortal sects were still capturing longbow people. They had captured another 10,000 longbow people, all in pairs of men and women, and planted soul-controlling spells in their souls. The people of longbow people were nearly extinct in the outside world. At least, no one in minor heavenly circle realm had ever heard of any longbow people living here. An ancient race with a formidable potential like this could fetch a price a few times higher than those powerful demon beasts when they were auctioned. No matter it was as a slave for the immortal sects, or as a guard of honor during a journey, they were very useful. Who asked them to be so tall and strong? When Wuxia and his company had gone far away, countless cries and screams were heard coming out from the nest where the people of longbow people lived. Every year, many longbow people would be captured by the slave traders from Great Yin Dynasty. But this time, over 20,000 of their people were captured. This was the heaviest loss in the history of longbow people. When those brave longbow people came out from their nests with fear and trepidation, Wuxia and his company had gone far away. Chapter 287. 10,000 longbow men began to work hard on the foundation of the new city that Wuxia had decided to build. They use huge rocks the size of small hills to make the foundation even and sturdy. 3 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal sect stayed behind, helping Wuxia in building the city. As White Cloud Immortal sect was an expert in the field of talismans and spirit pills, with them helping Wuxia to construct the defensive mechanisms of the city, he could rest assured of the strength of the city's defense. Princess Zhonglu returned with 3,000 lady officials, and continued to oversee the construction of the city. With Princess Zhonglu keeping watch, Wuxia had absolutely no worries. After spending 3 days at the construction site, Wuxia finally settled everything. Only then did he leisurely return to Ming Fortress, through the teleportation formation. 3 days ago, Wuxia did not meet Yandan and the others. Instead, he submitted a report to Patriarch Jiangyun and the other Heaven Immortals, asking them to select a group of nascent divinity cultivators to accompany Wuxia to the Great Eastern Ocean to abduct longbow men. Also, 3 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal sect were left behind to help Wuxia construct the defensive mechanisms of the city. He did not meet Yandan, as he wanted to avoid any unforeseen events that might occur after they met. Wuxia kept a distance from them, as he wanted to see the decision made by the emperors of the 6 dynasties. He had vaguely mentioned some things to Patriarch Jiangyun, and the reason why he returned to Ming Fortress today was to see what was the decision made by Yandan and the others. Just now, Wuxia received a message from Ming Fortress, saying that the plan had been finalized. The teleportation formation suddenly shone brightly. As soon as Wuxia walked out from it, he heard loud laughter coming from the meeting hall. Patriarch Jiangyun, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the 3 old Taoists, were laughing joyfully. Hastily, Wuxia flew to the entrance of the meeting hall, then carefully walked into it. Almost everyone turned to look at Wuxia at the same time. Yandan and Chu Ping nodded at Wuxia in a friendly manner, while the eyes of the others were filled with complicated emotions. This was especially true for those who held grudges against Wuxia. Their eyes were spitting fire, and they wanted nothing more than to stab Wuxia to death. Among them, Xiangyu's eyes were the most venomous. His eyeballs had turned blood red, and 2 beams of blood-red light were about to fly out from his eyeballs and pierce 2 holes in Wuqi's body. Looking straight ahead, Wuqi walked into the meeting hall. He first bowed to Patriarch Jiangyun and the few Heaven Immortals, then quietly returned behind Yandan, and sat down in an empty seat at the right-hand side of Lu Qingfeng. By doing this, Wuqi had silently shown that he was still a subject of Great Yan Dynasty, and was still a member of Great Yan Dynasty. Upon seeing Wuqi's action, Yandan suddenly put on a relieved smile and nodded his head in a gratified manner. After that, Yandan gave him a fierce glare. After a brief moment of pondering, he rose to his feet and bowed to Patriarch Jiangyun and the few Heaven Immortals. Then he said in a deep voice, "Dear Immortals, Great Yan's Duke of Tianyan Wuqi and my youngest daughter, Zixian, are very fond of each other. May I be so bold as to ask the few Immortals to be the witness for Wuqi and Zixian, and settle their marriage first?" Wuqi was surprised. He turned to look at Yan Qijuan, then nodded thoughtfully. Then he rose to his feet and came before Patriarch Jiangyun, dropped to his knees respectfully and said, "Wuqi is willing to marry Princess Zhonglu Zixian. Once Wuqi forms his nascent soul, he will marry Zixian." Patriarch Jiangyun nodded his head, smiled, and said, "This is a good thing, a very good thing. It is reasonable for a young man to marry after forming his nascent soul. Therefore, young men should be courageous and diligent in their cultivation. Generally speaking, even the disciples of various immortal sects will only look for a partner and marry after forming their nascent soul. Cultivating together with nascent soul is a good thing for both sides." After that, Patriarch Jiangyun gave Bai Xiao a look. Bai Xiao nodded and said, "Very good. Princess Zhonglu Zixian? Let her be my disciple, and let her cultivate with me." Yan Qijuan was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and thanked Patriarch Jiangyun and Bai Xia Immortal. With the decision made by 2 Heaven Immortals, the marriage was settled. Wuqi was secretly delighted as well. It was the best news that Bai Xia Immortal would take Princess Zhonglu as his disciple. At least in Liyuan Galaxy, no one would dare to touch Princess Zhonglu. As long as Princess Zhonglu was safe and sound, Wuqi could rest assured and boldly soar into the sky. Today he had left Princess Zhonglu in the new city, and after today he would ask Princess Zhonglu to make up for the ceremony of formally acknowledging him as her master. A heaven immortal's words carried enormous weight. The marriage between Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu was settled. Yan Qijuan gave Wuqi a fierce glare, then spun and returned to Yan Dan's side. With a strange smile on his face, Wuqi returned to Lu Qingfeng's side, then bowed his head and transmitted his voice to Yan Qijuan. "Don't worry, father. I'll definitely treat Zixian well." After a brief pause, Wuqi continued in a soft voice. However, Wuqi doesn't want Zixian to be fed an energy-seizing pill like her mother one day. From today onwards, she will be Wuqi's fiancée, and not just your daughter. Yan Qijuan's expression flickered. He turned and gave Wuqi a look, then slowly nodded his head. Wuqi nodded his head slowly as a greeting. Both of them, including Yan Dan who was sitting with his back straight, knew that from today onwards, Wuqi had truly become a member of Great Yan Dynasty. Through Princess Zhonglu, the interests of both sides had been closely linked together. All three of them knew that if not because Wuqi had brought Patriarch Jiangyun here, as well as White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, the marriage between him and Princess Zhonglu would not have been settled so easily. Wuqi had made a brilliant move, while Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan had pushed the boat along with the current, borrowing the other's strength to fight back. It was a brilliant move as well. Patriarch Jiangyun nodded at Wuqi with a smile, then said coolly, "In this way, the 3 days of discussion has finally come to an end. Emperor of Great Yan, Yan Dan, Emperor of Great Chu, Emperor of Great Wei, Emperor of Great Wei, come forward." As Patriarch Jiangyun's voice rang out, Yan Dan, Chu Ping, and Wei Wuji rose to their feet at the same time, and came before Patriarch Jiangyun, dropping to their knees and kowtowing to him respectfully. Wuqi gave Yan Dan and Chu Ping a furtive glance, then turned to look at Wei Wuji from head to toe. The Emperor of Great Wei, Wei Wuji, was a middle-aged man, standing 9 feet tall, with a square face and a fierce look on his face, especially his deep-set eyes and brows that were as sharp as blades. It was easy to tell that he was a man with a firm mind. Sensing Wuqi's gaze, Wei Wuji tilted his eyes and gave Wuqi a fierce glare. This Wei Wuji had a pair of very long eyes, which gave him a very wide range of movement. He could almost see his own ears, and his line of sight was very wide. Wuqi did not expect that he would have such a strange look, and could not help but want to burst out laughing when he saw Wei Wuji's behavior. The prime minister of this prince of Xinling, Wei Wuji, was Duke of Longyang. Narrowing his eyes and smiling, Wuqi was imagining the relationship between Wei Wuji and Duke of Longyang. Looking at the emperors of the 3 dynasties kneeling on the ground, Patriarch Jiangyun nodded his head satisfactorily and said, "Very good. With 3 excellent disciples, White Cloud Immortal Sect will have a bright future." Following that, Yan Dan and the other 2 changed the way they addressed Patriarch Jiangyun, calling him master. Patriarch Jiangyun smiled, then fished out 3 booklets made from purple gold threads from under his sleeve, and gave them to Yan Dan and the other 2. With a serious tone he said, "This is the mystic technique of our sect, the energy unity technique. In minor heavenly circle realm, it can be considered as a superior cultivation technique. Now that you have learned it, I can teach you the best." Once again, Yan Dan and the other 2 bowed their heads and listened to the order. After acknowledging Patriarch Jiangyun as their master, and receiving the mystic cultivation technique of White Cloud Immortal Sect, Great Yan, Great Chu, and Great Wei would become the vassals of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Just like the mortal kingdoms on White Cloud Planet, everything would be under the control of White Cloud Immortal Sect. From then on, all the raw materials related to cultivation produced by the 3 dynasties would be offered to White Cloud Immortal Sect, and if any natural or man-made calamity befell the 3 dynasties, White Cloud Immortal Sect would provide them with full assistance. In the presence of so many people, Yan Dan and the other 2 sworn their prime oath, swearing that they would be loyal to their master, and would never commit any crime of deceiving their masters. After that, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, Xiang Yu, Fan Zeng, Duke of Longyang, and the other important ministers of the 3 dynasties stepped forward and acknowledged by Xia and Qing Wu, the 2 heaven immortals, as their masters. They too received the legacy of the cultivation technique, and from then on, became the disciples of White Cloud Immortal sect. Everything went smoothly for the others, but when Duke of Longyang gracefully knelt before Bai Xia and Qing Wu, both heaven immortals had a strange expression on their faces. They were stunned for a while, and finally, Qing Wu, who was more amiable, accepted Duke of Longyang. After all the important ministers of the three dynasties swore their prime oath, swearing to be loyal to their masters, Patriarch Jiang Yun waved his hand, and all the ministers returned to their seats. After that, Yingzheng, Tianwen, Zhaosheng, and the other emperors of the three dynasties rose to their feet. Duqin, Great Zhao, and Great Qi became the vassals of Tranquil Vimla sect. The emperors and important ministers of the three dynasties also became the disciples of Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the three old Taoists. The emperors and important ministers of the three dynasties also swore their prime oath, swearing to be loyal to their masters, and that they would never commit any crime of deceiving their masters or destroying their masters. The three old Taoists also taught them the Tranquil Vimla sect's Tranquil Heart Sutra, and with that, the ceremony of acknowledging their masters was completed. After that, it was Patriarch Jiang Yun and Qing Xian's turn to reiterate that the two great immortal sects had been friends for several tens of thousands of years, and they were allies of life and death. Therefore, no matter what kind of enmity existed between the dynasties, no one was allowed to retaliate in private by any means, so as not to break the alliance between the two sections. If there was a personal grudge, it was fine to seek revenge, but it must be under the supervision of their masters and seniors, in a fair and open duel. Upon hearing the wishful warning from the two old Taoists, Wuqi could not help but laugh in his mind. Two great immortal sects have recruited this group of people who are as fierce as wolves and tigers, and you still want to live in peace. Not only the two great immortal sects, even Liyuan Galaxy and Minor Heavenly Circle Realm are waiting to have a hole poked through by this group of people. Wuqi had a feeling that he had borrowed a key, opened the gate of a beast, and released a group of dreadful beasts. Although Wuqi had no idea what kind of place this Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was, he felt that the heavens had blessed him. Looking at the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties in the hall, Wuqi lowered his voice and asked Lu Chengfeng, "Why do so many of them seem to have no objection to joining White Cloud Immortal sect and Tranquil Vimla sect? I can see that Xiang Yu and the others, even the most unruly ones, including the emperor of Qin dynasty, Yingzheng, are more than willing to acknowledge these two sects as their masters?" Lu Chengfeng gave the people in the hall a glance, then said in a low voice, "Come to think of it, it is a strange thing. For the cultivation technique of all the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties, peak stage nascent divinity realm is the limit. Even if they transcend their thunder tribulation and become heaven immortals, if they want to take another step forward, they will have to refer to the cultivation technique after the realm of heaven immortal. Now 2 great immortal sects have taken the initiative to recruit them as their disciples. How worthwhile is that? The cultivation technique of all the emperors was peak stage nascent divinity realm, and there was no other cultivation technique after that?" Wuqi nodded his head thoughtfully. No matter what, from now on, this planet would belong to White Cloud Immortal sect and Tranquil Vimla sect. Chapter 288. It was late at night. It was drizzling, and the air was foggy. Outside Meng Fortress, on the peak of the mountain where Heaven-Breaking Sword sect was stationed, there was a stone table and 4 stone stools. Wuqi was sitting beside it, carefully tending to a small red clay stove and a small teapot made from purple sand. This was the first time Wuqi learned that Mo sect actually had a disciple who specialized in making tea sets. All the tea sets made by him were exquisite, just like Mo sect's attainments in the field of weapons. The aroma of tea wafted through the air. Lu Chengfeng, Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong, who were sitting beside the stone table, could not help but sniff their noses at the same time. Good spring water matched with good tea leaves, and with Wuqi's rather decent skill in brewing tea. The tea leaves harvested from a 1,000-years-old tea tree in the depth of Meng Mountains were almost completely fragrant, which was more than enough to attract everyone's attention. Drizzling raindrops fell from the sky, but were pushed away by an invisible energy barrier above their heads. Not a single drop of water could enter the area of 30 feet around the stone table. Wu Qi poured a cup of tea for each of them, then picked up the teacup himself and took a deep breath of the aroma. After that, he gulped down the boiling hot tea. A scorching hot aroma rushed straight from his throat to his stomach, then slowly rose up from his stomach. The heat mixed with the aroma of tea instantly penetrated through his internal organs and sprayed out through every pore of his body, making him feel as if he had just ascended to the immortal realm. The rich energy contained in the tea spread through his body, and even his cultivation base of innate energies had been slightly enhanced. Good tea. Nyayanu tilted her head up and breathed out deeply. The green sword energy storm behind her back gradually retracted. A sword cry rang out, and the Jin Dan's strange sign on her body vanished completely. Indistinctly, there was a sharp sword energy emanating from her body, as if her entire being had merged with the surrounding heaven and earth. However, the heaven and earth were still the heaven and earth, and she was still herself. Although she had merged with the heaven and earth, they had yet to merge. Nie Baihong and Lu Qingfeng were shocked. Chi-Chi rose to his feet, bowed at Nie Yaonu and said, "Mother, congratulations on forming your nascent soul." Nie Yaonu put down the teacup and smiled reservedly. Wu Qi shook his head, poured himself and Nie Yaonu a cup of tea, then said coolly, "Grand Elder, I believe it has been more than a year and a half since you formed your nascent soul." All these years I've been pretending to be a human immortal like the Jin Dan. I've been constantly releasing sword energy and imitating the Jin Dan's energy storm. I believe I've used up quite a lot of my sword energy. I'm afraid the Grand Elder has already. Wu Qi stopped talking, raised his head and gave Nie Yaonu a deep look. Nie Yaonu gave Wu Qi a deep look as well. She said with a deep voice, "You are a smart little guy, but why is my son Baihong always so stupid? Why can't he figure it out? If his mother only had the cultivation base of Jin Dan, how could Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect become the strongest sect among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yin Dynasty in just a few hundred years? Although the cultivators of Jin Dan are competing with each other in all 13 immortal sects, how could the nascent soul ancestral masters of other immortal sects ignore this?" Nie Baihong's face turned purple. He stared at Nie Yaonu, laughed dryly and said, "Mother, this." Nie Yaonu raised her head up. A sharp gleam flickered in her eyes as she said coolly, 270 years ago, I had formed my sword nascent soul. It was a sword essence divine pill left behind by the ancestral master. It can help a cultivator condense his sword energy quickly and step into the nascent soul realm. Unlike the cultivators from other sects, as long as we have a strong sword intent, we can shatter everything with a single sword strike. Breaking through the nascent soul realm is not a waste of my energy." She glared fiercely at Nie Baihong, who seemed to be at a loss of what to do. She breathed out a long sigh and said, "Over the years, there were some nascent soul sinecures of Great Yin Dynasty who wanted to deal with Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. But before they could do anything, I would sneakily injure them, forcing them to swear an oath and enter a secluded cultivation, not paying any attention to the outside affairs. These fools thought it was His Majesty Yen Dan who sent the sinecures to warn them, and as expected, none of them dared to act rashly again." Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "I see. Grand Elder, you're really good at concealing yourself. Why are you no longer pretending today?" Nie Yaonu let out a long laugh, stuck out her chest and said, "In those years, in order to protect my son Baihong and the foundation of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, I had no choice but to continue pretending. Fortunately, the cultivation technique of a sword cultivator is completely different from that of other cultivators, and the sword nascent soul I formed is in the shape of a flying sword as well. I've fused it with my flying sword, refining it into my prime flying sword that can fuse with my sword. As a result, I don't have a sword nascent soul in my body, and that's how I managed to fool all the ministers of Great Yin Dynasty." She raised the teacup and gulped down the tea in one gulp, then said in a deep voice, "From today onwards, we are all disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect, and we are no longer bound by Great Yin Dynasty. So why should I still care about those rules and regulations of Great Yin Dynasty? My cultivation base is my cultivation base, and when I need to draw my sword and kill someone, I will do it." A cold laugh came from the dark figure. Together with a few of his trusted subordinates, Yanli came swaggering towards her. Yaonu, who are you trying to kill? Humph. Are you going to ignore the rules and regulations of Great Yin Dynasty? The reason why I'm here today is to tell you that there are some rules and regulations that you still have to. Suddenly, Nye Yaonu sprung up into the sky. A misty, green sword shadow flew out from her body, and then her body exploded, transforming into a clump of pure sword energy and fusing with the sword shadow. A glinting green flying sword, less than 1 foot and 2 inches long, flashed across the sky and pierced through the foreheads and dantian of Yen Li and the few other Jin Dan human immortals. Yen Li's eyes went wide in despair. Even until the moment of his death, he still could not figure out how Nye Yaonu killed him. He had never heard of Nye Yaonu's technique of fusing her body with her sword, and he had never seen Nye Yaonu using it. So where did she get such a powerful and brutal sword technique? A green light flashed, and Nye Yaonu's figure reappeared. She stared at Yen Li, who was still standing stiffly even until the moment of his death, and said with a cold voice, "Baihong Wuqi Qingfen, watch carefully. This is the real sword technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, the Unity of Sword Energies script. The Unity of Sword Energies script is just the introductory technique of the Unity of Sword Energies script. Does this old thief, Yen Li, really think that he has found out all my trump cards?" Yen Li's sudden arrival, and Nye Yaonu's violent killing, everything happened so fast that Wu Qi and the others had no time to stop them, and they were powerless to do so. On the same night when the entire Great Yin Dynasty had joined White Cloud Immortal Sect, Nye Yaonu revealed her cultivation base that was not weaker than peak stage nascent soul realm, and killed Yen Li and his trusted disciples with a single sword strike. Taking a deep breath, Nye Yaonu reached out her hand, grabbed Yen Li's head, and twisted it off his neck. Then, she brought the head to the edge of a cliff on one side of the mountain peak. Then casually threw the head off the cliff. She cried out sternly, "Damn it! Take a good look. I've killed one of the culprits who murdered you in those years. I'll never let go of anyone who was involved in the conspiracy against you. Today, I can kill as many people as I want, and I won't have to worry about their revenge, and I won't have to worry about them hurting our children." Nye Yaonu's voice was shrill and forlorn, sounding like a cuckoo crying blood. It made Wu Qi and the others' hair stand on end, and they could feel wisps of cold air drilling into their bodies. It was as if there was really a ghost hiding right beside them, quietly watching them. Wu Qi's heart was twitching. With the help of the sword origin divine pill left behind by an immortal, Nye Yaonu had formed her nascent soul 270 years ago, and now, her cultivation base had reached peak stage nascent soul realm. The cultivation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect was indeed magical, and that divine pill indeed had an incredible power. It was a miracle that she could endure for so long. There was a knife above the character endure. How many sharp knives had this white-haired old lady been stabbed in her heart? How could she endure so many years of suffering? Watching Yen Li swagger in front of her and devour the foundation of the heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect step by step in front of her. How strong and patient did she have to be able to sneakily develop so many disciples of Jin Dan in the inner sect of heaven-breaking sword sect under Yen Li's interference and spying? How could she be able to cultivate a city lord like Yi Zidu among her disciples? Nye Yaonu was a very patient person, especially when she possessed the overall strength that could easily kill Yen Li. This old lady was really scary. Once the opportunity came, she would kill her enemies like slaughtering pigs and dogs. With a casual swing of her sword, she would not give her enemies any chance to escape, nor would she waste her breath to show off her success in front of her enemies. She killed them with a single swing of her sword, cleanly and neatly. She truly had the heroic spirit of an ancient hero, who killed someone in the middle of the street, and settled his grudge. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, rose to his feet, bowed deeply at Nye Yaonu, and said with a respectful voice, "Grand Elder, I Wu Qi have great admiration for you. After all, he is the son of the Crown Prince, and now, Wu Qi is the future son-in-law of the Crown Prince. It will be very difficult for me to deal with both of them. Grand Elder, please gather all your trusted disciples and depart for White Cloud Immortal Sect right now." One figure after another emerged from the surrounding dark shadows. They were all the trusted disciples of Nye Yaonu, and some of them were carrying human heads that were dripping with blood. Judging from the appearance of those human heads, all Yan Li's trusted disciples, including Qin Shuwen, were killed by these inner-sect disciples of heaven-breaking sword sect. Wu Qi was struck dumb with astonishment, and he looked at Nie Yaonu with even more astonishment. Nie Yaonu laughed out loud and said, "I'll bring all my trusted disciples to White Cloud Immortal Sect right now. Little fellow, remember that you and Baihong used to be master and disciple. Although you've acknowledged a heaven immortal as your master, in the future, you will have to bear all the energy stones and spirit herbs needed by my disciples." Wu Qi bowed and said with a solemn expression, "I don't need Grand Elder to remind me about this. I had no other choice but to acknowledge Patriarch Jiang Yin as my master. Sect leader Nia will still be Wu Qi's master. In the future, Wu Qi will take care of all the needs of Grand Elder, my master, and all my fellow brothers and sisters." After bowing deeply, Wu Qi fished out a talisman of White Cloud Immortal Sect, wrote Jiang Qingzi's name on it, and threw it out. Immediately, the talisman transformed into a stream of flame and shot out into the distance. Before long, Jiang Qingzi arrived, stepping on a cloud and standing in front of Wu Qi. With only a few words, Wu Qi explained what happened here, and the old feud between Nie Yaonu and Yan Li. Jiang Qingzi was filled with deep veneration when he heard that. He cupped his fist and bowed at Nie Yaonu, then said in a low voice, "Come with me quickly. From now on, you will have to cultivate in the Five Swords Peak of White Cloud Immortal Sect. It is one of the core territories of Jiang Clan and White Cloud Immortal Sect, and no one will dare to disturb it. Once everything is settled down, I'll go beg Patriarch Qing Wu and ask her to accept Grand Elder as her disciple." When Patriarch Qing Wu traveled the world, she was fond of killing people with swords and avenging kindness and hatred. I'm sure she will like Grand Elder. After that, Jiang Qingzi left hastily with Nie Yaonu and the other disciples, rushing towards the grand universal teleportation formation that White Cloud Immortal Sect had constructed over the past few days. With him helping Nie Yaonu and her subordinates settle down, Wu Qi would not have to worry about them. Casually, Wu Qi flicked his sleeve and rolled Yan Li and the others down the cliff. Then he suddenly threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh. "Chengfeng, my brother wants you to stay in Great Yen and be the chief supervisor of White Cloud Immortal Sect's mines. Are you willing?" Chapter 289. After putting away the teacups used by Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong, Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng sat facing each other at the stone table. The two of them drank and drank by themselves. Accompanied by the light drizzle above their heads and the cool breeze around their bodies, it was a scene of the wilderness. Although they could smell a faint smell of blood coming from all directions, as Nie Yaonu's disciples had killed all the people who were loyal to Yan Li just now, both men did not pay any attention to it. What is the position of supervisor of mines? Lu Qingfeng looked at Wu Qi, feeling puzzled. For a major immortal sect like White Cloud Immortal Sect, each of them controlled an entire planet and governed dozens, even hundreds of kingdoms of various sizes. Naturally, when governing a kingdom, there would be mortal emperors who would take care of it. However, all the cultivation resources on the planet, including all the spirit herbs, energy stones and mines, and materials produced by demon beasts, were under the unified management of their disciples. The position of supervisor of mines was responsible for the mining, refining, storage, and allocation of all the energy stones and rare metals on the planet under the jurisdiction of White Cloud Immortal Sect. In order to fight for this position for Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi only briefly mentioned it to Patriarch Jiang Yun, and the latter immediately gave his approval. Wu Qi frankly told Patriarch Jiang Yun that the reason he asked Lu Qingfeng to be the supervisor of mines was to seek more benefits for himself and the people around him. With the great credit Wu Qi had given them by giving them a priceless planet, the small matter of Lu Qingfeng being the supervisor of mines was nothing to him. Even if Lu Qingfeng were to embezzle as much energy stones as he could, how many energy stones could he embezzle in a year? Even if Wu Qi ate energy stones like rice, how many energy stones could he spend in a year? Therefore, Patriarch Jiang Yun straightforwardly agreed to let Lu Qingfeng be the supervisor of mines, responsible for the mining of all the energy stones owned by White Cloud Immortal Sect on the planet where Great Yin Dynasty was located. However, Patriarch Jiangyun also told Wu Qi frankly that for the sake of Lu Chengfeng and Wu Qi, Lu Chengfeng could not hold the position for more than 300 years. 300 years. No one in White Cloud Immortal Sect could say anything about it. But if Lu Chengfeng were to hold the position for more than 300 years, and some people were jealous of him, even Patriarch Jiangyun would not be able to suppress him. In White Cloud Immortal Sect, an important position like this, which was responsible for the exploration of the sect's strategic resources, was usually rotated every 30 years. Once a person had reaped enough benefits, he would have to give up his position so that other people of the same sect could also reap some benefits. As the saying goes, in the affairs of the world, one should not worry about scarcity, but worry about inequality. Lu Chengfeng had been in this position for 300 years, and the amount of energy stones and various energy ores he obtained was more than enough for Wu Qi and the others to spend freely for several thousand years. Therefore, he should give up his position and let the core disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect have a share of the wealth. In a low voice, Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng were discussing all the details regarding the position of the chief supervisor of the mine. Wu Qi's opinion was that they should carry out destructive mining at all costs. Apart from the amount of energy stones they had to submit to White Cloud Immortal Sect every year, they should keep as many benefits as they could. After countless years of exploitation, the cultivation resources in Minor Heavenly Circle Realm and Liyuan Galaxy had nearly dried up. Now they could only rely on the natural energy veins to recover the pitiful amount of energy stones every year. For the sake of Wu Qi and the others' future cultivation, Lu Chengfeng had to get himself a sufficient amount of energy stones within these 300 years. After teaching Lu Chengfeng all sorts of techniques of embezzlement and fraud, Wu Qi, who had his mouth and tongue parched, grabbed the teacup and gulped down a few mouthfuls of tea. Then he turned to Lu Chengfeng, smiled and said, "Apart from the position of the chief supervisor of the mine, we have to continue developing in the same way. No matter it is Meng Fortress, Little Meng City, or my city on the Great Eastern Ocean, we have to make a good plan." Even though Great Yin Dynasty had submitted to White Cloud Immortal Sect, it was still Great Yin Dynasty. At most, it would lose the right to mine some energy stone and metal veins in its territory. In Great Yin Dynasty, it was still very important to own its own territory and a part of its secret forces, as they were the foundation for Wu Qi and the others to establish themselves. Both men had a very long discussion, and when the eastern sky was just beginning to brighten, they finally breathed out a long sigh of satisfaction. Picking up the teacup and taking a sip of tea, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile, "Oh right, what did those people say about me during these days?" Lu Chengfeng narrowed his eyes and smiled as well. He raised the teacup up, as if he was toasting with Wu Qi. Smiling, he took a sip of tea and said, "What did they say? What else could they say? You disappeared right under their noses with Jiangqing Zi, and then suddenly arrived with so many heaven immortals and cultivators from two great immortal sections. Obviously, you have become the trusted disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect's patriarch." What else could they say? After giving a few praises, Lu Chengfeng clapped his hands and said, "What a brilliant move, a brilliant move! I was still worried that after the alliance between the three dynasties, we would be surrounded by enemies everywhere. No matter it is Lu Buwei, Lao Ai, Duke of Longyang, or Xiangyu, they are all people we can't afford to offend. In the future, we will have to tread carefully with every step we take, and one careless mistake will bring us a disaster. Even though you are hiding far away from the Great Eastern Ocean, I think you are just buying time." Wu Qi threw his head back, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Indeed, going to the Great Eastern Ocean to build a new city is just stalling for time. Our enemies are too strong." Shaking his head, Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "For Great Yin, I've offended all these formidable enemies. But when these formidable enemies form an alliance with Great Yin, or even become Great Yan's imperial advisor or important ministers, Great Yin will not be able to protect me." A cold gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes as he said coldly, "If that is the case, don't blame me. As long as I have the chance, I'll turn the world upside down and make them lose everything. No one will be able to get any benefits from this. In Great Yin Dynasty, I'm just an insignificant minister, and anyone can find me an eyesore and trample on me. But now, I'm in White Cloud Immortal Sect, and I'm the personal disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yun. As long as we act cautiously, who dares to lay their hands on us? Clenching his teeth, Wuqi said coldly, Lu Buwei? How dare he send his men of sacrifice to ambush me on the battlefield? Duke of Longyang? How dare he challenge me with his swordsmen? Xiang Yu. Wuqi frowned, feeling a slight headache coming on. Naturally, the cunning Lu Buwei and Duke of Longyang would not rashly kill Wuqi before they found out the exact background of White Cloud Immortal Sect. But Xiang Yu, especially after he had turned into a fiend, who knew what he would do next? Lu Chengfeng frowned as well, and asked with a puzzled expression, I still don't understand why that Yuji came to you. Wuqi shook his head blankly, as he could not figure out the reason as well. If it was to provoke or retaliate against Xiang Yu, Yuji could simply find a pawn or a butcher, and perhaps make Xiang Yu suffer a few times more. So, there was no need for her to come to Wuqi. Frowning, Wuqi carefully reviewed what happened between him and Yuji. However, the information he knew was too little. Even though he had inherited the insane intelligence of Li Xiaobai, he could not figure out all the causes and effects. Irritably, he threw the teacup far away. Wuqi sprung to his feet, gnashing his teeth as he roared into the sky. Damn it! I'll go to the Great Eastern Ocean now and clean up those longbow people first. With a dangerous gleam flickering in his eyes, Wuqi planned to let those 9,900 longbow people drink the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup first. As long as they all formed their Jin Dan, the heavenly 100-spirit warring formation of 10,000 men would be more than enough to trap a nascent divinity cultivator. At the worst, he could just kill both Xiang Yu and Yuji, and put an end to all troubles. A killing intent rose in Lu Qingfeng's heart as well. Clenching his jaws, he said, In for a penny, in for a pound. Take out all the energy stone income for the next 3 years. Wuqi, you will sneak into White Cloud Immortal Sect, find Jiang Qingzi, and beg his father and grandfather to help you kill Xiang Yu. Wuqi's eyes flickered. It was a good idea. With the poor people in White Cloud Immortal Sect, they could really buy Xiang Yu's life with a huge amount of energy stones. As the 3 dynasties had just pledged their allegiance to White Cloud Immortal Sect, perhaps those senior cultivators in White Cloud Immortal Sect did not take Xiang Yu as their fellow disciple. Killing him would not be a big deal. While he was about to discuss the detailed steps with Lu Qingfeng, a white shadow suddenly walked out from behind a mountain rock not far away. Wuqi raised his head abruptly and pointed his finger out. Immediately, the sword of greedy wolf had arrived before the man's throat, leaving a dark trail behind. Staring at the white shadow, he cried out sternly, Yu Qianqian, how did you get here? You! Wuqi's heart was shaken. Yu Qianqian had already arrived beside him and Lu Qingfeng, but he did not discover how she appeared. How was that possible? Yu Qianqian was dressed formally, with a tall crown on her head and a white robe, with a few ancient-looking jade artifacts hanging on her waist. With a flip of her palm, she revealed a talisman glinting with a faint golden gleam. She said indifferently, with the protection of this talisman, not to mention you, even a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator would not be able to discover my trace. Walking slowly before Wuqi, Yu Qianqian grinned coldly and said, Duke of Tianyan, Duke Yanlu, you two sure have some guts. How could you plot and frame a great general of our ally here? Do you have any respect for the law of Great Yan? The law of Great Yan? It was as if Wuqi had just heard the funniest joke in the world. He shook his head and said, The law of Great Yan? Can they control the personal disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yin? If Wuqi still had any respect for the law of Great Yan, he would have long gone to His Majesty and told him that Yanli was killed by someone with a sword. Staring coldly at Yu Qianqian, Wuqi said proudly, Now Wuqi is the same as His Majesty, the personal disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yin. Since Wuqi and His Majesty have the same status, do you think the law of Great Yin can control me? What great general of our ally? I've killed him, so be it. Yu Qianqian pondered for a brief moment, then nodded and said, You have a point. Wuqi, Qianqian, and father have still underestimated you. We never expected that all the heroes of 6 dynasties would be toyed with by you alone. Wonderful, wonderful. You risked your life to save Jiangqingzi, just so that you could bring White Cloud Immortal Sect here, and break the current rule of 6 dynasties? Good, very good. With this, you will be like a dragon soaring in the sky, and all the enemies you made in Great Yin will have no way to touch you. Wu Qi smiled faintly and said, You can say I'm a dragon soaring in the sky, but you can also say I'm a cornered dog that will do something desperate. That's why I took a gamble at all costs. Fortunately, I've won the gamble. Now the 2 great immortal sects own everything here, and I'm the personal disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yun. Those enemies of mine can no longer touch me, and I can spend my days in peace. Yu Qianqian nodded and praised. Indeed, a good plan, a good idea. And the rarest thing about you is that you have the drive to risk your life. If no one can kill you in advance, perhaps, your achievement will be beyond everyone's imagination. She fixed her gaze at Wu Qi, then said in a deep voice, Wu Qi, Qianqian knows that you have an engagement with Zhang Le. But Qianqian doesn't mind sharing you with Zhang Le. If you and Qianqian also have an engagement, all the manpower and material resources of Yu Academy will be yours to use. Wu Qi was struck dumb, while Lu Qingfeng was struck dumb. All of a sudden, Wu Qi came before Yu Qianqian, and gave her a loud slap. After that, Wu Qi let out a wild laugh and sprung up into the sky, grabbing Lu Qingfeng. Then both of them transformed into beams of light and sped away. Wu Qi laughed wildly and said, Yu Qianqian, Lao Tzu doesn't like old women who are older than Lao Tzu. Ha ha ha, you want Wu Qi to marry you? Dream on. The sudden slap from Wu Qi made Yu Qianqian spin 3 times on the spot. She was struck dumb and could not move at all for a long while. After a full quarter of an hour, Yu Qianqian suddenly let out a strange and ferocious laugh and said, Very well, Wu Qi, with this, you and I are now mortal enemies. Hee hee, you can come up with a clever plan. Using the 6 dynasties as a bargaining chip to join White Cloud Immortal Sect, which has given you the upper hand. But do you think Yu Qianqian is so easy to deal with? She stamped her feet, tilted her head up, spun, and transformed into a gust of breeze that drifted away. Chapter 290. In the Great Eastern Ocean, there was an island located 3,600 miles southeast of the place where Wu Qi built his city. Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon stood blankly on the waves, their eyeballs nearly popping out of their sockets. They stared in horror at the dark clouds that suddenly surged out of the island in front of them. They watched as the enormous power of the thunder tribulation in the dark clouds rumbled down without any time to accumulate. 108 shockingly powerful thunderbolts struck down in a disorderly manner. She patted her big head, shook her head, breathed out a long sigh and said, Now I know why the legendary longbow people who can survive the heavenly tribulation are as rare as the sea turtles who can escape from my mouth. TSK, tell me which one tastes better, the green-skinned sea turtle, or the blue-skinned one. I even saw a gold and silver sea turtle in the ocean the day before yesterday, and it was very chewy. Lord Xianxing gave Catfish Flood Dragon a blank look, then shook his head and ignored her. Catfish Flood Dragon's brain was cramping and short-circuiting from time to time. Just a moment ago, she was talking about the longbow people's Jin Dan thunder tribulation. And now she was talking about sea turtles? On the island, Wu Qi was hovering in midair, letting the thunderbolts keep smashing heavily on his body. On the ground, all the longbow people, including Chi-Chi, were standing in 99 square formations, staring at the dark clouds and thunderbolts in horror. The longbow people's heavenly tribulation was an eternal pain in their hearts. How many crimes had their ancestors committed against the heaven and earth that they were left with such a curse in their bloodline? Even the heavenly tribulation of a nascent divinity cultivator could not compare with such a thunder tribulation. If an ordinary longbow man were to encounter such a thunder tribulation, he or she would be killed on the spot. Therefore, although longbow people had a long lifespan and amazing innate divine abilities, very few of them would devote themselves to cultivation in order to make a breakthrough. It was because the moment they formed the Jin Dan was the moment they would die. The faster they cultivated, the faster their cultivation base improved, and the faster they would die. Any longbow man with a sane mind would not choose to cultivate, and would rather spend the rest of his life peacefully. Apart from the great divine magus of Longbow Kingdom, who had no choice but to cultivate in order to inherit the various mystic techniques and divine abilities of longbow people. Ordinary longbow people, including the strongest warriors in their clan, would not deliberately improve their overall strength. As for the great divine magi of longbow country, a large number of their clansmen would be killed every 100 years. Therefore, the bloodline of the great divine magi of longbow country had always been sparse, because the other clansmen had all been killed when they were trying to break through the Jin Dan. On the other hand, Wuxia was able to hover in the sky and block the thunder tribulation for them, which was powerful enough to kill any longbow man. This level of divine art, this level of divine power. Standing on a mountain not far away, Long Yuan and 100 longbow men, who had long been subdued by Wuxia, roared out at the same time. Great divine Magus! This is the real great divine Magus. He is the great divine shaman sent by our ancestors to save us. Only the real great divine Magus can block the thunder tribulation for us, allowing us to form the Jin Dan. Raising both arms up high, Long Yuan leaped and roared. By following His Excellency, great divine Magus Wuxia, we, the people of Longbow Kingdom, will have the hope of prosperity. Although the bodies of longbow men were huge, their brains did fit the description of muscle brains. Upon hearing Long Yuan's bewitchment, coupled with the frightening divine ability and power Wuxia had displayed in front of them, all 9,900 longbow men dropped to their knees in front of Chi-Chi, shouting great divine Magus at the top of their lungs. Bolts of thunder kept falling down, and large patches of golden runes appeared on the faces and arms of more and more longbow men. These golden runes formed into a complicated and exquisite circular formation, crazily absorbing the surrounding natural energies like a black hole. Suddenly, the bodies of these longbow men began to expand rapidly. From the original height of 100 feet, they had grown to about 1,000 feet. There were also those elite warriors who were born with great innate talent and strength. Their height suddenly rose to 3,000 feet, which was twice the height of Long Yuan now. For the people of Longbow Kingdom, there was a direct way to measure their overall strength. When none of them used their innate divine ability to transform their bodies, the one with the biggest body and the most developed muscles would definitely be the strongest warrior in the clan. Thunderbolts kept falling down from the sky. One after another, these longbow men, who had consumed the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup, formed the Jin Dan, welcoming their Jin Dan thunder tribulation. These tough longbow men could form the Jin Dan just like ordinary people eating eggs. In just a few breaths of time, the Jin Dan had formed in their dantian. It took an ordinary human cultivator several hundred years of hard work to form a Jin Dan. The innate talent of these longbow men simply left one speechless. No wonder even the heaven disliked them, and their Jin Dan thunder tribulation was so violent. A blinding golden light shone from Wuqi's body. 18 celestial fiend puppets had transformed into his appearance, hovering around him and absorbing the thunderbolts that kept falling down from the sky. Using a mystic technique, he extracted a tiny thread of pure yang energy from the gold core thunder tribulation, using it to temper his soul and form strands of nascent divinity. More than 1 million thunderbolts kept falling down from the Jin Dan thunder tribulation of nearly 10,000 longbow men. While Wuqi's body was severely injured by the thunderbolts, his soul had shone with a dazzling golden light. In Wuqi's spiritual ocean, a tiny fist-sized Wuqi had formed. This tiny Wuqi had a corporeal body, emitting a pure and gentle golden light. Obviously, it was a nascent divinity that had formed a corporeal body. Wuqi was able to form such a nascent divinity at the early stage of Jin Dan. The various mystic techniques found in Scroll of Stealing had perfectly demonstrated the essence of stealing the heaven and earth. Of course, compared to a real nascent divinity cultivator, this tiny nascent divinity was slightly smaller. The nascent divinity of a nascent divinity cultivator was as tall as their innate nascent embryo, at least a few feet tall. However, this tiny nascent divinity of Wuqi was only the size of a fist. However, this tiny nascent divinity of Wuqi was formed with the pure yang thunder tribulation. It was so solid that it looked like it was cast from iron. Even some cultivators at the late stage of nascent divinity realm did not have a nascent divinity as strong as Wuqi. When the last thunder tribulation came crashing down, Wuqi suddenly threw his head back and let out a long roar. A tremendous sound wave towered up into the sky and shattered the clouds in the sky. A strong golden light kept bursting out from Wuqi's body, transforming into streams of sword energy that swept across the surroundings. The small island underneath trembled violently as it was shattered into pieces by Wuqi's crazy outburst. Immediately, 10,000 longbow men of Jindan realm sprung into the sky and stood behind Wuqi with Chi-Chi. Catfish Flood Dragon looked at these longbow men disapprovingly. She stared blankly at these huge fellows, trying to figure out which one was more tender and delicious, their muscles or those of a turtle. Meanwhile, Lord Xianxing was staring at these 10,000 longbow men with shock and fear. A longbow man of Jindan realm could already fight against a nascent soul cultivator, and 10,000 longbow men whose overall strength was equivalent to that of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. This benefactor of hers, this brother whom she had acknowledged, was indeed an unpredictable man. With such a brother, she could go anywhere in the world in the future. At the thought of this, Lord Xianxing could not help but burst out laughing. He stretched out both arms toward Wuqi and said, "Brother Wuqi, this mystic technique of yours really has the ability to seize the fortune of the heaven and earth, and reverse the heavenly mystery. 10,000 longbow men of Jindan realm. What do you want me to say?" Wuqi gave Lord Xianxing a tight hug, then smiled and wagged his fingers. The black dragon spirit ring and spirit breeding ring were glittering on his fingers. "Brother Xianxing, in order to expand this spirit breeding ring, I need a few spirit items that can only be found in the deep sea," he said in a deep voice. Lord Xianxing nodded and said, "Leave it to me. I'll go find the 3 strongest dragon kings of the Great Eastern Ocean. As for these spirit items from the deep sea, they are just decorations. I'll get you enough materials, enough for you to store 1 million longbow men in the ring." Upon hearing that, Wuqi was tempted. He laughed and said, "If that's the case, thank you, brother." Both men held hands and laughed, their hearts filled with a deep bond. Suddenly, a gust of chilly wind came approaching at high speed from the northwest. A ghost immortal of mid-stage nascent soul realm was flying toward them. The ghost immortal amidst the chilly wind had his hair disheveled, and his body was shrouded in ghostly flames. He was also an imperial guard secretly produced by Great Yin Dynasty, and was now assigned by Yandan to protect Princess Zhonglu. Currently, Princess Zhonglu had 16 ghost immortals of nascent soul realm as her personal guards. From afar, the ghost immortal roared at the top of his voice, "Duke of Tianyin, Princess has lost her temper. She wants you to go back now. The emissary of Great Wei, Duke of Longyang, has come to visit, but Princess has stopped him at the city gate, forbidding him from entering." "Ugh. Duke of Longyang has come to visit?" Wuqi shuddered abruptly. He grabbed Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon and cried out, "An unwelcome guest has come to visit. Quickly gather all your men, deploy a formation, and hide in the shallow water outside the city. When they hear my signal, rush out and kill them." After giving a few orders to Long Yuan and the other longbow men, asking them to follow closely behind him, Wuqi took out the talismans given to him by Xia and Qing Wu, exercised the acquired magnetic sword beam, and transformed into a stream of light as he sped towards the construction site of the new city, which had been named Star Picking City. The speed of the acquired magnetic sword beam was very fast, and it did not take him long to cover the distance of over 3,000 miles. Currently, the base of the city wall, about 10 feet tall, had been built around the city wall. When Wuqi arrived at the western city gate, Princess Zhonglu was standing at the gate with a group of imperial guards, blocking Duke of Longyang, who had come alone. Smilingly, Duke of Longyang looked at Princess Zhonglu, who looked like she was about to fight a rooster, and kept smiling. Right when Wuqi's sword beam descended, Princess Zhonglu grabbed Wuqi's arm and cried out, "How could you let this demon, who is neither a man nor a woman, come to visit us?" While Wuqi was grinning awkwardly, Duke of Longyang had already bowed to Wuqi and said with a faint smile, "Duke of Tianyin, 7 days ago, Yanli, the son of Crown Prince Qijuan of Yan Dynasty, was killed, and some of the disciples of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect have gone missing. I wonder if Duke of Tianyin knows about this?" Wu Qi's eyes went wide in bewilderment. Yinli was killed? Ugh, Zixian, do you have any impression of Yinli? Princess Zhonglu twitched her red lips and said with a cold grin, Who is Yinli? What does it have to do with me? Wu Qi turned to the startled Duke of Longyang, smiled and said, Look, even Zixian doesn't care about Yinli's life or death. Who is Yinli? What does his life or death have to do with me? Duke of Longyang frowned in a troubled manner. He shook his head, breathed out a long sigh and said, Then Duke of Tianyun, do you know that a few immortal masters are about to open the door to the Tsang'ao immortal abode? And we can see the archway in front of the main entrance now. Wu Qi was taken aback instantly. Tsang'ao immortal abode? The immortal ruins that Great Wei and Great Zhao were fighting over? Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi cried out anxiously, An honorable guest is here. Quickly prepare some fragrant tea. Princess Zhonglu was so angry that she pinched Wu Qi's ribs, while Duke of Longyang smiled and followed Wu Qi into the city in an elegant manner. River Luozhong 1 net. Chapter 291. Right at the center of Star-Picking City, where the future City Lord Mansion would be located, only a few luxurious tents were erected, surrounded by brocade curtains. On the north side was a tent, measuring over 200 feet in diameter. It was the daily residence of Princess Zhonglu, who oversaw the construction of Star-Picking City. Several hundred feet away, on the east side was another tent, where the 3 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect stayed in Star-Picking City to help Wu Qi construct the defensive mechanism of the city. Now all 3 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators had returned to their tents. If Duke of Longyang made any unusual move, what awaited him would definitely be a thunderous strike. Inside the tent, which was luxuriously decorated and looked just like a luxurious palace, Wu Qi was sitting on the main seat, while Princess Zhonglu was sitting on a soft cushion beside him, staring at Duke of Longyang with an unfriendly gaze. Out of the instinct of a woman, Princess Zhonglu would always be vigilant towards any living being that could pose a threat to her. Although Duke of Longyang was a man who was even more enchanting than a woman would pose a greater threat than a woman. Baijuer and Baizuer brought tea to the table, then stood on both sides of Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu like 2 little demons with green faces and sharp fangs, staring at Duke of Longyang with the same unfriendly gaze. As the personal serving ladies of Princess Zhonglu, Baijuer and Baizuer could naturally empathize with a man who was even more enchanting than a woman, and shared the same hatred. After all, in a sense, they were also one of Wu Qi's future wives and concubines. A man like Duke of Longyang was indeed a threat to all of them. Nonchalantly, Duke of Longyang picked up the teacup and took a gentle sniff of the aroma. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, Good tea, good water, and good charcoal fire. Too bad, I'm still lacking in the ability to control the temperature of the water. It was supposed to be an excellent tea, but now, it can only be considered as an ordinary tea. If Duke of Tianyun is interested, Longyang has a good tea ceremony. Princess Zhongli's eyes widened, and it looked like she was about to fly into a rage. Hastily, Wu Qi grabbed her thigh and gave it a hard press. Princess Zhongli's face blushed as her thigh was grabbed by Wu Qi. She bowed her head in a sweet voice, carefully rubbing the corner of her dress, and did not say another word. On the other hand, Baijuer and Baizuer were so angry that their faces turned blue. They glared fiercely at Duke of Longyang and cursed in their hearts. Lord Longyang actually said that his tea brewing skills were not good enough? This tea was brewed by Baijuer and Baizuer using all of their resources. Ignoring Lord Longyang, Wu Qi raised the teacup with one hand and took a sip of the fragrant tea. Indifferently he said, This is a wonderful tea. Lord, you are being too picky. Lord Longyang cast a glance at Wu Qi, sighed softly and said, It is not easy to live in the human realm. It's not easy for people to live in the first place, so why be so harsh on yourself? Throughout my life, be it clothes, food, or daily necessities, I have been very picky about everything, fearing that I would suffer even the slightest grievance. Sighing again, Lord Longyang turned to Princess Zhonglu, smiled and said, For example, the rouge used on Princess's forehead, is it made from the juice of a tricolored rose that just bloomed on a spring night? Princess Zhonglu raised her head in astonishment and said, You can even tell that? Lord Longyang smiled charmingly, nodded, and said, Tricolored rose has a beautiful color, which is a good product. However, because of its beautiful color, it is suitable for those royal ladies who are getting older and have a bit of amorous feelings. Princess Zhonglu is a fairy, and she is in the prime of her youth. Therefore, tricolored rose products are not suitable for her. According to Lord Longyang's opinion, Princess should try the rouge powder made from purple lilac. It is elegant and beautiful, and it will not cover up Princess's natural beauty. At the same time, it can soften the skin, making it look like a layer of light smoke. It is the best product. Princess Zhonglu blinked her eyes in astonishment. She was so shocked by Lord Longyang's opinion that she could not say a word. Wuqi, on the other hand, felt his scalp tingle. This old devil was indeed a peerless evildoer. He pressed hard on Princess Zhongli's thigh and shouted in a deep voice, My lord, did you come here just to discuss the rouge powder? What serious business do you have? Tell me quickly. Lord Longyang put down the teacup and covered the corner of his mouth with his sleeve. Then he suddenly raised his eyebrows and said with a serious face, First, Duke of Tianyin has killed my beloved concubine. What does Duke of Tianyin have to say about this? Wuqi glared at Lord Longyang and said with a sneer, Cut the crap. What does your beloved concubine or chicken have to do with me? You have promised Lu Bue and received some benefits from him. If you want to kill me, you must be prepared to be killed by me. If you don't accept it, I will kill you here today. So what? Let's see if Wei Wuji will fall out with me, Wuqi, because of you. With a heavy palm strike, Wuqi smashed the table in front of him into pieces. Then he pulled out an immortal talisman glinting with a green gleam and stared fiercely at Lord Longyang. A gust of breeze came and lingered in the tent, as three old men clad in Taoist robes appeared out of thin air, standing in a straight line before Lord Longyang. Three powerful spiritual pressures blotted the sky and blotted the earth as they pressed towards Duke of Longyang. One of the old men sneered and said, Wuqi is the personal disciple of Patriarch. If anyone dares to mess with him, he will be making things difficult for White Cloud Immortal Sect. Immediately, Lord Longyang's serious face turned as charming as a spring flower. He gave the three old men a coquettish glance, covered the corner of his mouth and said with a faint smile, Why do you take it so seriously? Longyang was just joking with Duke of Tianyin. How could I bear to harm such a wonderful man like Duke of Tianyin? Looking at Lord Longyang's expression, the three nascent divinity experts from White Cloud Immortal Sect could not help but have goosebumps all over their bodies. They grinned and gave Lord Longyang a look, then spun, transformed into a breeze and disappeared. Since they had given Lord Longyang a warning, no matter how bold he was, he would not dare to attack Wuqi in this place. They could not bear to look at a charming and enchanting demon like Lord Longyang, so they could only stay far away from him. With a wave of his hand, Wuqi threw the long narrow table before him out of the tent. Then Baizhur and Baizhur brought another long narrow table and placed it before him. With a deep voice, Wuqi cried out, My lord, let's talk about something serious. Wuqi is young and rash, and he can't understand your romantic tricks. Lord Longyang gave Wuqi a deep look, then slowly straightened his back. A threatening heroic spirit burst out from his body, and in an instant, he transformed from an enchanting demon whose beauty could topple a state into a handsome hero who was brimming with heroic spirit, like a sharp blade that had just been unsheathed. At the same time, his voice had changed from the gentle and neutral tone to a voice that sounded like the knocking of a jade stone, a clear and sonorous voice that vaguely carried a murderous tone. He stared at Wuqi and said, All right, let's talk about something serious. The death of Yan Li has given some people in Great Yan Dynasty the opportunity to stir up trouble, saying that you are disrespectful to Great Yan, and have the intention of rebelling against Great Yan. Wuqi shook his head, sighed and said, It's still nonsense. My lord, please don't use these nonsense to frighten Wuqi. Wuqi is already engaged to Zixian, and he and Great Yan Imperial Clan are in the same boat. No one can jump out from the same boat. If Wuqi were to plot against his father and grandfather after he was engaged to Zixian, would Wuqi still be able to face the world if this news was spread out? His Majesty is not a fool, and neither is the Crown Prince. Since they have allowed Patriarch Jiang Yin to make the decision, and let Zixian be engaged to me, Why are they afraid that I will stand on my own? Rebellion? If I were a heaven immortal, there might be a possibility. But too bad, Wuqi only has the cultivation base of Jindan now. Duke of Longyang opened his mouth, shook his head and laughed. Duke of Tianyan, you are indeed a stubborn man. Well then, let's talk about something serious. He pondered for a brief moment, as if he had completely forgotten the two things he mentioned just now. With a solemn expression he said, His Majesty of Great Wei has the intention to form an alliance with Duke of Tianyan. In the future, as long as Duke of Tianyan can take care of Great Wei and White Cloud Immortal Sect, countless mighty soldiers and valiant generals of Great Wei can be used by Duke of Tianyan. Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then gently pressed his finger on Princess Zhongli's thigh. Princess Zhongli rolled her eyes, sneered and said, Mr. Longyang. Princess Zhongli emphasized on the word Mr. Sneered and said, Wuqi is Zhongli's husband, and that makes him a member of Great Yan's imperial clan. Great Yan has countless mighty soldiers and valiant generals as well. So why would we need the army of Great Wei? Duke of Longyang said indifferently, The army of Great Yan belongs to Yandan. On the other hand, the army of Great Wei can be personally deployed by Duke of Tianyan. The difference between the two is like the difference between heaven and earth. It is impossible for Duke of Tianyan to deploy the army of Great Yan to kill Lu Buwei, but the army of Great Wei can obey the order of Duke of Tianyan and besiege the entire Lu clan. Duke of Longyang did not conceal anything, and his words were as naked as a newborn baby. Princess Zhongli narrowed her eyes and turned to look at Wuqi. Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then nodded and said, All right, Great Wei and Great Yan are now the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect if possible. Casually, Wuqi pointed at the entrance of the tent. Duke of Longyang smiled faintly, then clapped his hands lightly. Immediately, a large sheet of white mist and white lotus flowers burst out, enveloping the entire tent tightly. He chuckled and said in a low voice, Now we can discuss the conditions of both sides with peace of mind. Wuqi leaned his body forward, while Duke of Longyang craned his neck and leaned over. Using the quickest speed, both men whispered for a while. Then both of them reached out their hands at the same time and held each other's palms. Wuqi smiled and said, That's great, this is a very fair and reasonable condition. From now on, Wuqi and his wife will advance and retreat together with Great Wei. Of course, the premise is that the immediate interests of both Great Yan and Great Wei will not be harmed. Duke of Longyang had regained his enchanting look. He held Wuqi's palm tightly and said softly, Duke of Tianyan has a very strong hand. Wuqi's expression changed abruptly, turning almost blue. Princess Zhongli glared at Duke of Longyang furiously, then forcefully slapped her palm onto the tightly held palms of both men, separating them. After that, right in front of Duke of Longyang, Princess Zhongli took out a silk handkerchief, dipped it into the tea, and carefully wiped Wuqi's palm. Wuqi looked at Duke of Longyang helplessly and said, Zixian is still young. Please don't take it to heart, Duke. Duke of Longyang breathed out a long sigh, then nodded his head indifferently and said, Why would Longyang take it to heart? Duke of Tianyan, you have to be careful. It is the scholars of Yu Academy who are spreading the rumor that you are going to abandon Great Yan and establish your own independence in Ji City. Currently, 70% of all the civilian officials in Ji City regard you as their enemy. On top of that, the youngest young master of Zhao Kingdom, Zhaoling, has known Wei Xiaoxiao for a long time. When he heard that Wei Xiaoxiao was killed by you, he has secretly contacted Lu Buwei, planning to assassinate you, Duke of Tianyan. Slowly, Duke of Longyang rose to his feet, retracted his divine ability, and said coolly, I have no idea how many precious treasures are hidden in Sang'ao Immortal Abode. Duke of Tianyan, you have to go there and try your luck. After a brief moment of pondering, Duke of Longyang smiled and said, Before I came here, I heard from a few immortal masters that the defensive mechanism at the front entrance of the Immortal Abode is very magical, and it will take at least 10 days to break through it. If Duke of Tianyan has the intention to go there, I suggest you make a plan as soon as possible. Duke of Longyang spun and walked towards the entrance of the tent. Waving his hands lightly behind his back, he praised softly, I have to say, Duke of Tianyan has made a good move this time. By luring White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect into this place, you've destroyed all the plans of 6 dynasties, and in the end, Duke of Tianyun is the only one who can benefit from it. Over the past few days, that old fogey Lu Buwei has killed several dozens of his beloved concubines, and he hates Duke of Tianyun to the core. Upon hearing Duke of Longyang's words, Wu Qi just smiled proudly. No matter how much you hate me, what can Lu Buwei do to me? Song Ao Immortal Abode, I Wu Qi am coming. Ye thief major yes. Chapter 292. East of Star Picking City, by the shore of the ocean, Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli stood side by side, gazing at the vast ocean in the distance. Princess Zhongli was obviously not in the right state of mind. She looked at Wu Qi with a sad face, pouted pitifully, and said, "Do I really have to go to that white cloud planet? I have never seen those by Xia Immortal and Qingwu Immortal. Wouldn't it be great if I could build a city here? Why should I take them as my master? Why should I go to White Cloud Planet?" Wu Qi stroked Princess Zhongli's cheek and sighed softly. "The tree desires peace, but the wind will not subside. Without Zixian by my side, I can deal with those people easily." Turning his head and gazing deeply into Princess Zhongli's beautiful eyes, Wu Qi said with a smile, "Zixian, you are my most precious darling. How can I bear to let you hurt even a hair on your head? Go to White Cloud Planet, and work hard in your cultivation. When you reach the realm of Heaven Immortal, you will be able to protect me." Princess Zhongli pinched her fingers unhappily and sighed softly. "Reach the realm of Heaven Immortal? That's so difficult." Wu Qi pinched her nose hard and said with a smile, "It is difficult for others, but it is very easy for Zixian. From the early stage of Jin Dan to the middle stage of Jin Dan, you have only spent a few months to completely stabilize your Jin Dan and form your solid core. Do you know that other Jin Dan stage cultivators would need hundreds of years of painstaking work to reach this step, but you only spent a few months? And you will at most become a Heaven Immortal in 100 years, right? Cultivating to become a Heaven Immortal in 100 years? Wu Qi was obviously fooling Princess Zhongli. Gently kissing Princess Zhongli's cheek, Wu Qi said with a smile, "Zixian is the smartest girl in the world. A mere Heaven Immortal is nothing to me." Princess Zhongli pondered for a moment and frowned. Finally she nodded and said, "You're right. 100 years to become a Celestial Immortal? Zixuan will work hard." Suddenly, Princess Zhongli grabbed Wu Qi's arm and bit it hard. The bite tore his skin and flesh, causing blood to flow out. A deep bite mark was left on his arm. Wu Qi was in so much pain that he kept gasping, but his heart was twitching. According to Lu Xiaobai's understanding of women, a woman who likes to bite usually lacks a sense of security. Did such a proud Princess Zhongli not have any sense of security? With a sudden thought in his mind, Wu Qi hugged Princess Zhongli tightly and pressed his forehead against Princess Zhongli's. Suddenly, a tiny slit appeared between Wu Qi's brows. A stream of blood wrapped around the silver lotus, which had shrunk to the size of a sesame seed, rushed into Princess Zhongli's forehead in a blink of an eye. Wu Qi released a thread of his nascent divinity and gently touched Princess Zhongli's soul, then taught Princess Zhongli the mystic technique of forcibly forming a nascent divinity, with the help of heavenly thunder he learned in Scroll of Stealing. After that, he mobilized nearly 70% of the innate energies in 10 innate Jin Dan, and kept injecting them into Princess Zhongli's body. Suddenly, Princess Zhongli's blushing face turned as red as blood. An enormous amount of pure innate energies surged crazily into her body, forcefully smashing onto her dazzling 5-colored Jin Dan. Princess Zhongli's Jin Dan was like an evil ghost that had been starving for hundreds of thousands of years, and suddenly saw a bloody sheep. Hastily, it began to devour the innate energies of 5 elements that came knocking on its door. The 5-colored divine ray behind Princess Zhongli's back flickered rapidly, and suddenly expanded to the size of several acres. But not long after that, the 5-colored divine ray began to shrink rapidly, turning into 5 extremely fine threads of light, and fusing into 5 strands of Princess Zhongli's long hair, hiding it so well that no one could see it. 70% of Wu Qi's innate energies of 5 elements, which was equivalent to the cultivation base of nearly 1,000 cultivators in Jindan, rushed into Princess Zhongli's Jindan, quickly pushing Princess Zhongli's Jindan to a magical transformation. First, it pushed Princess Zhongli's cultivation base skyrocketed to the peak of Jindan realm. As long as her understanding of the heavenly Tao was improved, she could fuse her soul with the Jindan according to the mystic technique of nascent soul formation, and she would be able to break her Dan and form her nascent soul smoothly. After that, Princess Zhongli's Jindan began to emit a 5-colored bright ray. The nature of her Jindan had been forcibly transformed into half innate and half acquired. From now on, Princess Zhongli's Jindan would absorb the energies of 5 elements from the outside world, and the Jindan she formed would carry half innate and half acquired attributes. No matter it was the power or the divine ability, it would be far superior to ordinary cultivators in Jindan realm. Together with the innate gold and silver lotus that Wuqi had fused into her forehead, Princess Zhonglu would have a life-saving treasure, and her safety would not be a problem anymore. Together with the protection of Baixia and Qingwu, 2 female immortals, Princess Zhonglu would be as safe as Mount Tai in White Cloud Planet. As for the divine flame of order on top of the silver lotus, it was split into half by Wu Qi's enormous and condensed power of nascent divinity. Then, he used the innate energies of 5 elements in his spiritual ocean, and carefully confined it in the void. The destructive power of this thing was too strong. Without the restraint of the silver lotus, Wuqi would have to figure out a way to control and utilize it. With the other half of the divine flame of order in her hand, Princess Zhonglu would not have to worry about the risk of suffering from energy deviation when she was cultivating. He put his mouth next to Zhongli's ear, and told her about the origin of the silver lotus. After that, Wuqi hugged Zhonglu tightly, almost bringing her little head into his chest. With a low voice he said, "Only you and I know the origin of this treasure. In the whole world, only you and I know it. Don't ever use it unless you are in a life-threatening situation. It is a good treasure, and it will make others jealous." Meanwhile, Princess Zhonglu was exercising her cultivation technique to absorb the enormous energies that Wu Qi forcibly sent into her body. After inheriting her mother's innate divine ability, Princess Zhonglu also possessed an innate talent that was close to the acquired divine energy of 5 elements. Now that she had absorbed the innate energies of 5 elements sent into her by Wu Qi, it was not strenuous for her to exercise her cultivation technique. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, she kept nodding her head excitedly, then stood on tiptoe and kissed Wu Qi passionately. At the same time, she also transmitted all the mystic techniques she inherited from her bloodline to Wu Qi through her divine will. An enormous amount of strange and bizarre techniques kept rushing into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Some of them were recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, but some of them were so unimaginable that they were not even mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing. All kinds of poisonous goo, magisprius curses, and spells of spirit speech were mystic techniques that were completely different from the orthodox qi refining cultivators. Among them, there were also many mystic techniques related to mountain ghosts and Yin deities. Wu Qi was so happy that he nearly laughed out loud. Rubbing Princess Zhongli's little head, Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice, "All right, it's time for you to depart. According to that old monster Long Yang, in just a few days, Lu Buwei and his men will come and find trouble with me. It's a good opportunity for me to teach them a good lesson. Go to White Cloud Planet. Focus on your cultivation and don't make me worry. My little woman. My little woman." Princess Zhonglu raised her head stealthily and gave Wu Qi a quick glance. After that, she nodded her head vigorously, spun, and stepped onto a cloud and left at top speed. 16 nascent soul ghost immortals rode chilly winds, and followed closely behind her. Together with Baizu and the other serving ladies and imperial guards, they followed closely behind Princess Zhonglu. On the peak of a distant mountain, a few female cultivators clad in white clothes were waiting for Princess Zhonglu. After Duke of Longyang left yesterday, Wu Qi immediately sent a message to Baixia and Qingwu, asking them to send over some female disciples. Among them was a peak-stage nascent divinity female cultivator, and they would escort Princess Zhonglu to White Cloud Planet, to the Spirit Cloud Peak where Baixia and Qingwu usually cultivated in seclusion. Song Ao immortal abode, coupled with the fact that Lu Buwei had instigated Zhao Sheng's youngest son, Zhao Ling, to come and find trouble with Wu Qi, things would get really lively. If he did not send Princess Zhang Lu to an absolutely safe place, how could Wu Qi have the mood to deal with an old demon like Lu Buwei? Princess Zhang Lu was different from Lu Qingfeng. Even if Lu Qingfeng was attacked by someone and lost an arm or a leg, Wu Qi could avenge him later, and it would not be a big deal. But if Princess Zhang Lu was harmed by someone with malicious intent, even if Wu Qi killed all his enemies, it would be useless. Therefore, Princess Zhang Lu had to leave this place. Fortunately, Princess Zhang Lu was deeply in love with Wu Qi. Although she was reluctant, she still obeyed his order and left this planet. As long as Princess Zhang Lu was safe, Wu Qi could finally do whatever he wanted. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi spun and waved his hand at a far distance. Lu Ziyuan and Hai Yuntian rushed over with an excited expression on their faces. Hai Yuntian, who was originally dressed in a short green outfit, had changed into a long green robe, and he now looked like a scholar. Wu Qi sized them up for a while, then nodded his head and said, "From today onwards, Brother Ziyuan will be the city lord of Star Picking City. You will be in charge of all the administrative affairs of Star Picking City. In the future, whether Star Picking City can be established as a nation or not will depend on Brother Ziyuan's capability." Lu Ziyuan quickly bowed deeply at Wu Qi, then raised both of his hands high up in the air to show his respect to Wu Qi, thanking Wu Qi for putting him in such an important position. As for his broken arm, Wu Qi had bought some spirit herbs from White Cloud Immortal Sect, and had it reattached to his arm. After comforting Lu Ziyuan, Wu Qi turned to Hai Yuntian and said, "Brother Yuntian, you and I are old friends, so let's skip the small talk. From today onwards, the Star Picking Pavilion under the name of Star Picking City will be under your control. From today onwards, all the local products and precious treasures of Great Eastern Ocean will be sold and auctioned by all the merchants from different kingdoms." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said proudly, "From today onwards, all the local products of Great Eastern Ocean will be jointly monopolized by Star Picking City and Purple Leaf City. Those who are not convinced, ask them to find the new Dragon King, Lord Xianxing and Catfish Dragon King, who live in the vicinity of several tens of millions of miles." Hai Yuntian thanked Wu Qi joyfully. With this promise from Wu Qi, the business of Star Picking Pavilion in the future would be monopolized. Was there any business under the heaven that could bring more profit than monopolizing? As a comprador of G City for several dozens of years, Hai Yuntian could not wait to show off his skills. After dismissing both men, Wu Qi had finally settled all the affairs in Star Picking City. Right after he let out a few long laughs, he saw a dark cloud rolling towards him from the horizon. Lord Xianxing brought a large group of prawn soldiers and crab generals, and arrived on a cloud. While they were still tens of miles away, Lord Xianxing could not wait any longer and let out a loud laugh. "My good brother, I've not let you down. All the materials you need to expand the spirit breeding ring, I've brought you 100 times the amount. Sigh, it's not really a spiritual item. This spirit storing jade is used as a brick in the Dragon King's residences of the old Dragon Kings." Wu Qi was rendered speechless. The most important function of the spirit breeding ring was that it could freely absorb natural energies from the outside world, providing them to the living beings stored in the ring. The spirit storing jade was one of the most important materials for the spirit breeding ring. In Great Yin Dynasty, a fist-sized spirit storing jade was worth tens of thousands of gold coins. But in those Dragon King's mansions in Great Eastern Ocean, they were actually used as bricks? Shaking his head, Wu Qi felt that he had to pay a visit to those Dragon King's mansions in a few days. 7 days later, on the shore of East Ocean, a beam of white light swept across the sky. Amidst the white light, 10,000 tall and burly longbow men vanished without a trace. Wu Qi caressed the spirit breeding ring on his finger, which had expanded by more than 1,000 times. Once again he threw his head back and let out a loud laugh. Who under the heaven could bring an army of 10,000 men with him? Lu Buwei, Zhao Ling, or anyone else, I Wu Qi, will be waiting for you. Chapter 293. After sending off Princess Zhonglu and settling all the affairs in Star-Picking City, Wuqi had successfully expanded the spirit breeding ring, allowing him to carry 10,000 longbow men with him. Leisurely and alone, Wuqi traveled from Star-Picking City through a teleportation formation and returned to Meng Fortress. After that, he traveled through a teleportation formation and arrived at the border between Great Wei and Great Zhao, a lofty mountain with a scale no smaller than Meng Mountains, but even more precipitous and majestic. He Mountain. At the heart of He Mountain was a vast lake, measuring 1,000 miles in circumference. It was a great lake with a diameter of 1,000 miles, but its depth was over 27,000 miles. It was like a deep well, and not even the heaven and earth could create such an unreasonable existence. It could only be a man-made miracle. At a depth of 27,000 miles, the water pressure in the deep water had reached an unimaginable level. Only an earth immortal with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm or above, who was supported by an excellent defensive magical treasure, and exerted all his strength, could walk and breathe freely like a mortal. However, if one wanted to fight, compete with magical techniques, or assassinate each other with flying swords, only cultivators of nascent divinity realm would have the strength to spare. At the deepest part of the lake, the water here was no longer water, but acquired water essence, which was as sticky as glue, pitch black like ink, and several hundred times heavier than mercury. In the outside world, this kind of gui water essence was a rare natural treasure, an excellent material for crafting magical treasures. However, in the depths of this nameless lake, there was a large piece of it that had a circumference of 1,000 miles and a thickness of over 10 miles. Right in the center of the lake, a silver speck of light, 100 miles in circumference, was vaguely visible. It was a silver beam that shot straight out from the bottom of the lake, right before the entrance of Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode. Originally, it was only several tens of feet in circumference, but when it reached the surface of the lake, it had expanded to 100 miles. Following the silver speck of light, 100 miles in circumference, 100 miles in circumference, was the entrance of Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode. Currently, on a grassland that measured several hundred acres in circumference next to the lake, the flags of the emperors of 6 dynasties were fluttering above the city. Above the imperial flags of 6 dynasties were a plain white flag and a plain green lotus flag, representing White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. These 2 flags were actually top-grade magical treasures as well, but they did not have any defensive or offensive power. The only function they had was to release a strong light and auspicious cloud, which allowed these 2 flags to be clearly visible from tens of thousands of miles away. Even an ordinary mortal could clearly see these 2 flags from tens of thousands of miles away. This was the grandeur that an immortal sect should have. Standing above the teleportation array in the Earthen City, Wuqi, who was enjoying the scenery around him, did not think much of it. Wuqi was clearly an insignificant figure in the 6 nations. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be too many people paying attention to him. However, right after he walked out from the teleportation array, he was immediately greeted by numerous hostile gazes. Some of them even did not conceal the killing intent in their eyes. Judging from the current situation, there were at least 1,000 people in the Earthen City who wished they could crush him into pieces. It was especially true for Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang, the 2 military officers of Xiang clan, who had just brought a team of elite soldiers and drove a bronze chariot into the city, with piles and piles of bloody prey placed in the chariot. When they saw Wuqi, their eyes immediately turned red. Both men exchanged a glance, and under the gloating gazes of countless people around them, they suddenly turned the chariot around and sped towards Wuqi. Wuqi looked coldly at Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang, who were driving the chariot towards him. Suddenly, he fished out an immortal talisman from Black Dragon Spirit Ring, glinting brightly with a green gleam, and lightly flicked one of its corners with his finger. An enormous immortal pressure burst out from the surface of the immortal talisman, causing the rhino that was pulling the chariot to stop its wild charge, then knelt on the ground timidly. No matter how exasperatedly Xiang Zhuang raised the whip and lashed at the rhino refused to rise to its feet. Feeling the pain, the rhino, who had formed his demon core, turned his head angrily and roared at Xiang Zhuang. General Xiang Zhuang, It is an agreement signed between our ancestors and the Emperor of Great Chu that our people are helping Great Chu in the war. We are not going to die in vain. That little fellow has an immortal talisman in his hand. A talisman crafted by a heaven immortal. If you want to die, go ahead. For the sake of our many years of cooperation, I'll help you collect your dead bodies later. Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang's faces turned blue with anger. Suddenly, some people near and far let out mocking laughter together. Amidst so many people who were laughing at them, the fat Wuxia, who was sitting on a deck chair on the wall and enjoying Li Yuyan's gentle massage, laughed even louder and harsher. Slapping his own belly, he could not help but burst out laughing and said, "Generals, why aren't you fighting anymore?" Sigh. This monarch thought that you would be willing to sacrifice your lives to avenge the humiliation of your nominal lord and mistress. Xiang Ta's muscles bulged, but he could still maintain his consciousness. On the other side, Xiang Zhuang roared furiously and drew his sword, thrusting it towards Wu Qi's chest while leaving a blood-red trail in the air. Holding the sword with his right hand, Xiang Zhuang clenched his left hand into a fist and punched forcefully towards Wu Qi's forehead. The punch was piercingly cold, and a large sheet of red energy exploded in the air. It was obvious that he was going to smash Wu Qi's head with this punch. A cold gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. Just as he was about to activate the immortal talisman and kill Xiang Zhuang on the spot, a beam of white light suddenly came shooting at him. A jarring sound of metal clashing rang out, as the sword in Xiang Zhuang's right hand was shattered into pieces. Suddenly, a hole was pierced through his armor, and a white beam as thick as a fist appeared on his body, leaving a huge hole on his body. Xiang Zhuang howled miserably as blood sprayed out from his body, and he was knocked flying backward. The flesh and blood around the wound on his chest were wriggling rapidly, healing the wound at an incredible speed. However, a wisp of extremely sharp Tai Bai Chi of life was hiding near his wound, preventing it from healing. Bathed in blood, Xiang Zhuang fell to the ground and slid back for several thousand feet, knocking his head onto a bronze flagpole. Only then did he manage to stabilize himself. The white beam dissipated, and Jing Ke revealed himself from within. He stared coldly at Xiang Ta, who had pulled out his sword, and said coolly, "Great Chu and Great Yen are allies. If you do not wish to stir up a conflict between the two dynasties, I suggest you exercise restraint. Since the emperors of both dynasties are disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect, by suddenly attacking Duke of Tianyun, who is also a disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect, is that considered as betraying the sect and deceiving the master? Are you trying to make His Majesty Chu Ping fulfill the oath he made when he joined White Cloud Immortal Sect, and have his soul destroyed?" Raging with rage, Xiang Zhuang struggled to his feet, and was about to cooperate with Xiang Ta and continue their assault. But they suddenly heard Jing Ke's rebuke. Both men exchanged a glance, and cold sweat suddenly broke out from their foreheads. Suddenly, a fat figure flashed across from the side. It was Wuxia, the fat man, who was standing in front of Wu Qi. Smiling, he shouted at Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang, "General Jing Ke is right. Duke of Tianyun is the direct disciple of Patriarch Jiang Yun. Are you trying to put His Majesty in an unjust position by attacking him? Are you trying to make His Majesty break the oath and die?" The sudden appearance of Wuxia had left Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang with no other way to deal with him. Both men gave a muffled snort. Then Xiang Ta carried the severely wounded Xiang Zhuang and went to find a place to heal his wounds. Smiling, Wuxia nodded at Wu Qi, then turned to look at Li Yuyan, who was standing on top of the city wall. After that, he spun and teleported next to her, then sat down heavily on the deck chair. Wu Qi also turned to give Li Yuyan a deep look, as an almost imperceptible sneer emerged in his eyes. "Perhaps, no one could recognize you after you changed your appearance, but how could Wu Qi not recognize the scent on your body? Naturally, a qualified thief would not let go of even the slightest scent." Jing Ke greeted Wu Qi, then said in a low voice, "She is from Great Chu. The identity of this woman is very complicated. Do not provoke her unless necessary. I think she is the younger sister of Li Yuan, the current Prime Minister of Great Chu, the King of Chunshen, Wuxia's." Twitching his lips, Jing Ke used a very common term to describe Li Yuan. "Old mistress." Wuqi smiled, shook his head, and followed Jing Ku into the assembly hall located right in the center of the city. When Wuqi walked into the Great Council Hall, all the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties turned to look at him with surprise. After that, a few of them who had a grudge against Wuqi even scolded him. How could a mere Duke of Tianyun of Great Yin dynasty, who did not have any actual power in the imperial court, have the qualification to visit such an important place? How could he have the qualification to attend the meeting of the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties? Wuqi could sense the hostility in the eyes of these people. He smiled sheepishly, walked slowly next to Patriarch Jiangyun, kowtowed, and said, "Master, with the help of 3 senior brothers, everything in Star-Picking City has gone smoothly. I have handed over all the tasks in my hands, and I can now accompany Master and listen to your teachings." Patriarch Jiangyun nodded his head gladly, then waved his hand and said, "Rise, my disciple. As your cultivation base is still weak, you should consult me more often in the future. If there is anything you don't understand, you can always come to me and ask me. For the next few days, you can always stay by my side." Patriarch Jiangyun snorted lightly, then suddenly unleashed an enormous immortal pressure. Immediately, all the emperors and ministers in the hall felt a chill run down their spines. Only then did they suddenly remember that although Wuqi was a minister of Great Yin, he was now the trusted disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect's patriarch. The degree of favor he received was far greater than any of them. The hostile gazes quickly disappeared. With a faint smile on his face, Wuqi strode to the back of Patriarch Jiangyun and the other heaven immortals, then stood aside. Intentionally or unintentionally, he turned to look at Lu Buwei, but the latter just kept looking at Wuqi with a smile on his face, as if nothing was amiss. In fact, there was even a hint of benevolence in the way Lu Buwei looked at Wuqi, as if he was a benevolent grandfather looking at his obedient grandson. A chill ran down Wuqi's spine. Sure enough, this old traitor was not easy to deal with. If it were someone who was a little more reckless, he would have been fooled by him. After giving Lu Buwei a glance, Wuqi finally turned to look at the group of people who were kneeling in the center of the hall, their bodies shackled by runes and unable to move. Their faces looked extremely old. So old that they were merely skin and bones. And when they breathed, it seemed like they would stop breathing at any time. However, the aura of their souls was extremely powerful. Vaguely, there were various beast souls drifting behind their backs. Among these beast souls, the strongest one was a white horse with a pair of wings on its back. Vaguely, it showed signs of breaking through peak stage nascent soul realm. A peak stage nascent divinity cultivator from Tranquil Vimla sect cupped his fist and bowed to the 6 heaven immortals, then said, "Ancestral masters, here are 135 men. They are the clan leaders and oracles of the 72 strongest barbarian clans in He Mountain and Ming Mountain. Ancestral masters, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them." A bright gleam flickered in Wuqi's eyes as he gave these old men a surprised look. Were they the leaders of all the strongest barbarian clans in He Mountain and Ming Mountain? Chapter 294. Inside the Grand Hall, over 100 barbarian leaders were seen sitting cross-legged on the ground, their bodies glinting brightly and covered with all kinds of restrictive talismans. Their cultivation base was completely sealed, and they could not activate even a tiny bit of their aura. However, their beast souls were extremely lively, as they revealed their true forms behind their backs, wriggling and struggling silently as if they had gone mad. They threw their heads back and roared into the sky, emanating tremendous soul energy waves that made Wuqi feel suffocated. Wuqi had witnessed the unique beast warrior technique of Great Yin Dynasty's scouting office. With the power of beast souls, an ordinary Hotian warrior could unleash the strength equivalent to a low-tier Xiantian cultivator. However, the cultivation of beast warriors was extremely harsh and difficult. Just like what Qin Qingshui had done, he had to consume countless spirit pills and rare natural treasures to push his nether python to the nascent soul realm. As for these barbarian leaders, who had a cultivation base equivalent to an early-stage nascent divinity cultivator, only God knew how many years they had been cultivating and how many resources they had consumed. Furthermore, The life force in these barbarian leaders' fleshly bodies was nearly depleted, and their flame of life could be extinguished at any time. However, their souls were incredibly strong. When their souls were combined with their beast souls, they were a few times stronger than ordinary cultivators with the same cultivation base. Their souls were full of life force, and they kept emanating tremendous soul energy waves, making it impossible for ordinary people to stand in front of them. Wuxia stared at these barbarian leaders in surprise, pondering the uniqueness of their beast soul cultivation technique. Without a doubt, the beast warrior cultivation technique of scouting office was robbed from the barbarians. Just like all the other cultivation techniques, they were all robbed from the barbarians. However, Wuxia had a feeling that there was something very mysterious and unusual about this beast soul cultivation technique, as if the meaning hidden in it was far more than what he had seen today. The divine sense of a heaven immortal was extremely powerful, and its power was boundless. Although Wuxia was standing behind Patriarch Jiangyin, he could still see the surprised and thoughtful expression on Wuqi's face. Patriarch Jiangyin didn't move his lips, but his voice, which was as thin as a gossamer, had already echoed in Wuqi's mind. This is the most orthodox cultivation technique of the human race when the ancient human emperors ruled the world. I didn't expect to find some fragments of it in this place. In just one breath of time, Patriarch Jiangyin had explained to Wuxia what the so-called beast warrior technique was. The so-called beast warrior was the most orthodox and fundamental cultivation method of the human race during the era of the ancient human sovereign. The human race was born from the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. They were born with great luck and were destined to become the masters of heaven and earth, the spirits of all living beings. As for the newly born human race, they were weak and powerless. They did not have a good way to resist the various dangers of the natural world. Therefore, there were great heroes among the human race who used their great strength to subdue powerful beasts, subduing their souls and merging them with their own human souls. The human race was born with 3 souls and 7 spirits that corresponded to the laws of heaven and earth. Thus, they were born with the ability to understand the secrets of heaven, investigate the geography, and were born with intelligence. As for the beasts, they were born with either 1 soul and 1 spirit, 1 soul and 2 spirits, or 2 souls and 2 spirits. In short, their souls were incomplete. Apart from some rare divine beasts that existed during the creation of the world, such as the legendary Qilin or Phoenix, all the other beasts would always have incomplete souls. With incomplete souls, they would be born ignorant. Even if they were fated to be immortals and learned the Tao of cultivation, they would have to face many difficulties and obstacles, making it difficult for them to transcend. On the other hand, these beasts would give up their fleshly bodies and merge their powerful beast souls with the human souls. With that, they would be able to absorb the essence of the 3 souls and 7 spirits from the human souls, completing their souls and obtaining endless benefits. The human race monopolized the fortune of heaven and earth. Any beast that could merge with the soul of a human warrior and lend its powerful innate power to the human warrior, protecting the human race from being harmed by the natural world, would be rewarded with a great amount of virtues. With the virtues, when the human warrior's lifespan came to an end, his beast soul would enter the cycle of transmigration. With the protection of the virtues, he would be able to transcend his beast body and reincarnate into a human, or into the body of a high-level immortal beast or divine beast. Especially with the protection of the virtues, they could retain part of the memories of their previous lives, which made it extremely easy for them to cultivate in their next lives. Therefore, it was a mutually beneficial thing for both sides. In the ancient times, most human warriors had merged with the beast souls, which allowed them to unleash a formidable power that could even fight against the ancient heavenly gods. In the ancient times, the strongest human warriors could even merge with the beast souls of the legendary descendants of the 4 holy beasts, which gave them a tremendous power that could destroy the heaven and earth. Yen Bugui and the others, who had only merged with the wind-breaking wolf, which was a demon beast, could only unleash the power of Xiantian realm. Compared to the ancestors of the human race, they were extremely weak. These barbarians were not barbarians, but the descendants of the most orthodox lineage of the human race. All kinds of cultivation techniques they mastered were the strange abilities left behind by the ancient ancestors of the human race. Wuxia took a deep look at these barbarian leaders, who were so old that they could not be described with words. He could not help but shake his head. After explaining the origin of these beast souls to Wuxia, Patriarch Jiangyin said, "Listen up, all of you. We come with no evil intentions. We just want to find out the origin of this planet." The barbarian leaders fell into a moment of silence. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the oldest barbarian, an old man, whose body was densely covered with countless embroidery patterns and holding a pitch-black bone staff, slowly rose to his feet. Coldly, he glanced at the 6 heaven immortals sitting high up in the hall, then suddenly laughed coldly and said, "You came straight into our clan, killed many of our people, and abducted us here without any evil intentions? If you had any evil intentions, you would have wiped out all of us, wouldn't you?" "That is just a misunderstanding," said Patriarch Jiangyin coolly. "It was your people who attacked my disciples first." The old barbarian pondered for a brief moment, then slowly nodded and said, "My children are always harassed by these people outside the mountain. Therefore, when they see outsiders, they attack them with all their strength. We can't blame them for that." Glancing around, the old man said in a cold voice, "It is these people. Ask yourselves, how many young girls from different clans have you abducted from the forest all these years?" The emperors of the 6 dynasties looked at each other, but none of them said a word. Only the heavens knew the exact number. Great Yen had issued the barbarian killing order, and every year, countless barbarians were killed by the warriors of Great Yen. Apart from Great Chu, the situation in all the other dynasties was almost the same. The young barbarians were always the targets of slaughter, while the pretty and wild barbarian girls were the favorite collection of the rich and powerful. Over the years, only the heavens knew how many barbarian girls had been abducted from the forest. Didn't Yan Qijuan marry a barbarian holy maiden, and even gave birth to Princess Zhanglu with her? Even a holy maiden had been abducted, let alone ordinary people. The old barbarian snorted coldly, then looked at Patriarch Jiangyin and said in a deep voice, "Look, immortals, you can't blame us for this." Patriarch Jiangyin was not moved by the old man's words. "You can't blame my disciples," he said coolly. "You were the one who attacked first, and that was courting death. Answer my question now, or else, your entire clan will be wiped out." An enormous immortal pressure was unleashed without reservation. The frightening immortal pressure of Patriarch Jiangyin, which was infinitely close to 35th tier heaven immortal, immediately made all the barbarian leaders kneel on the ground, unable to move. The old barbarian knelt on the ground, drenched in sweat. Suddenly, his shriveled body began to swell, and his muscles began to bulge. Patriarch Jiangyin sneered and said, "Are you still trying to resist? Do you really want your clan to be wiped out? Answer my question, and you can go back safely. From now on, the people of these dynasties will not disturb your peace, but you are not allowed to disturb the people outside the mountain." Upon hearing Patriarch Jiangyun's words, the old barbarian's body quickly shriveled up again. He pondered for a brief moment, then nodded and said, "Our lifespan is not long, and we are not as long as the legendary leaders of the various clans in the ancient times. We can live up to 300 years at most, and that is already a blessing from the heaven. Therefore, many things are passed down by word of mouth from generation to generation, and when it comes to us, many of the records are incomplete." Lao Ai suddenly said with a cold grin, "Why don't you record them in the ancient books and keep them well?" Patriarch Jiangyin gave Lao Ai a look, nodded slowly, and agreed with Lao Ai's question. The old barbarian rolled his eyes, sneered, and said, "You have been wantonly plundering all kinds of ancient books and records left behind by our ancestors. Do you think we would dare to record those precious ancient stories? The most important things are the origin of our clans, and they are all recorded in our hearts. In the future, we will have to rely on these records to reunite with our ancestors. If they are robbed by you, what should we do?" His words rendered Lao Ai speechless. He twitched his lips and did not say another word. In the great hall, the old barbarian patriarch began to narrate slowly. A very long time ago, about 2 great apocalypses ago, This planet was called Myriad Immortals Planet, and it was the most famous planet in Minor Heavenly Circle realm where cultivators gathered. When the Great Apocalypse began, all the clans went to war, and the heaven and earth turned upside down. First, it was the war between the armies of the human race and the cultivators. Then the armies of fiendish devils broke through the void and came to fight against the cultivators and the human race. The war lasted for several thousand years, and countless mighty existences were killed or wounded. Later on, the leaders of the armies of the human race were either killed or wounded, and the armies that followed them scattered into the mountains. Later on, alliances of various clans were formed. As a result, the descendants of the cultivators were nearly wiped out, and only a small number of cultivator clans survived. On the other hand, the fiendish devils suffered a great loss. Apart from some of the weakest fiendish devils, all the stronger fiendish devils had disappeared. The war between the three parties was so chaotic that the sky was shaking and the earth was cracking. No one knew which party was the one who flew into a rage out of humiliation, and decided to simply cast a restrictive spell, shattering millions of planets in the vicinity of Myriad Immortals Planet, turning it into a desolate land where no one could enter or leave. Patriarch Jiangyun nodded and said, "So, the origin of the flaming nether ocean can be traced back to 2 great apocalypses ago." When Patriarch Jiangyun said that, all 6 heaven immortals could not restrain their excitement. Even Bai Xia, who was the most reserved among them, had a faint smile on her face, and a bright gleam could be seen flickering in her eyes. It was no wonder that the descendants of the Longbow people and Feathermen, who had gone extinct in Minor Heavenly Circle realm, could still be found on this planet. This kind of tribulation would often cause the world's origin energy on the surface of a planet to become extremely chaotic. For a very long time in the future, there would not be any powerful cultivators appearing on this planet. Patriarch Jiangyun counted with his fingers and said, "I see. About 100,000 years ago, this Myriad Immortals planet had barely recovered, and that was the reason why nascent divinity cultivators could appear here. Before that, the strongest cultivator was merely a nascent soul cultivator. However, the lifespan of nascent soul cultivators is limited. They could not even ascend to the immortal realm." Wuxia quickly took a step forward and said, "Weining Dragon King of Longyuan River once had 2 flood dragons who ascended to the immortal realm." Patriarch Jiangyun shook his head, smiled faintly and said, "That was something that happened in the last 100,000 years. It was something that happened 2 great apocalypses ago. I'm afraid those 2 flood dragons only know that this is Myriad Immortals Planet, and what happened in those years. However, I'm afraid even the current immortal monarchs of Minor Heavenly Circle realm have no idea about the exact location of Myriad Immortals Planet. As a matter of fact, this priceless planet now belongs to White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect." At this point, Daoist Qing Xian laughed out loud and said, "This is a priceless planet left behind 2 great apocalypses." During the last great apocalypse, it was said that the descendants of Minor Heavenly Circle Immortal Monarch were wiped out by someone, and all their scriptures were completely destroyed. Now no one knows the exact location of Myriad Immortals Planet. Therefore, this priceless planet really belongs to us now. Unable to restrain the excitement in their hearts, all 6 heaven immortals roared with laughter. Now that they knew the origin of this priceless planet, they could develop it to their heart's content, and make their sex grow stronger as much as they wanted. Patriarch Jiangyun sprung to his feet excitedly and said, Good. This is indeed a great thing. Everyone, follow me to open the Tsang-Ao immortal abode." Cultivators from 2 great immortal sects stepped forward and released the barbarian leaders as promised. At the moment, these leaders were of no use to them. With the 6 heaven immortals leading the way, all the people in the grand hall responded to Chi-Chi's call and rose to their feet. Wuxia followed closely behind the 6 heaven immortals and walked out of the grand hall. The company stepped onto clouds and flew straight towards the silver speck in the center of the lake. Chapter 295. The army stepped onto clouds and flew towards the Tsang-Ao immortal abode in a mighty formation. an abode left behind by an immortal who had fallen before the two great apocalypses made the six heaven immortals, including Patriarch Jiang Yun, extremely excited. In the end, 36th-tier heaven immortals were just the weakest existences in the cultivation system of immortals. In the cultivation system of immortals, minor heavenly circle realm could only serve as a stepping stone. It was not hard to imagine how attractive an ancient immortal abode was to Patriarch Jiang Yun and his companions. If not for the fact that they were suspicious of the origin of Myriad Immortals' planet, and had ordered their disciples to capture barbarian leaders to gather information, perhaps these six heaven immortals would have long broken the last restrictive spell of Tsang-Ao immortal abode with violence, rushing into the abode and looting everything. Wuxia followed closely behind Patriarch Jiang Yun, stealthily glancing around at the emperors and ministers of the six dynasties, who had a calm expression on their faces. A priceless planet left behind by a great war before the two great apocalypses? And it was such a coincidence that millions of planets in the vicinity of this priceless planet were shattered, leaving behind a flaming nether ocean that even gold immortals could not enter and exit freely? And the location of this priceless planet was right in the middle of the flaming nether ocean. And no one had discovered it after so many years? During the Great War between the three dynasties, all three dynasties had their descendants left behind. It was not hard to imagine that the emperors and ministers of the six dynasties were the descendants of those cultivators. Because of the fluctuation of natural energies, the descendants of these cultivators could hardly achieve any success in their cultivation base. The strongest among them could cultivate to the realm of nascent soul, but they could only live for several thousand years before they fell one after another. Over 10 billion years had passed since the two great apocalypses, and after several tens of thousands of generations, it was only natural that the descendants of these cultivators had forgotten the great achievements of their ancestors. It was not until 100,000 years ago that the natural energies in this place calmed down. Therefore, the descendants of these cultivators rose in the wilderness, gradually growing stronger and prosperous. Finally, over 2,000 years ago, under the command of the emperors of the six dynasties, Yen Dan, the emperors of the six dynasties, defeated the alliance of barbarian tribes in one fell swoop, and gradually developed to the present day, forming the six dynasties. Wuxia sighed in his mind. The story was perfectly woven, and at least Wuxia could not find any loopholes. From the looks of it, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others were convinced of this statement, and there was no doubt in their hearts. If it weren't for the fact that Wuxia and Yen Dan came from the same place, and were familiar with the names of these people, he would have been fooled. How did they get here? What are they doing here? Wuxia frowned and instinctively took a step closer to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Patriarch Jiang Yun keenly sensed Wuxia's little movement. He turned to Wuxia, nodded amiably and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid, my good disciple. Although this is a cave abode of an ancient immortal, after so many years of changes in the underground energy veins, all the defensive mechanisms in this cave abode are broken and incomplete. So there is not much danger in here. Hihi 2 Ians. This age is really too ancient." Taking advantage of the situation, Wuxia said, "Master, please be extra careful. After all, this is a cave abode left behind by an ancient immortal. Those defensive mechanisms are dead, and will be worn away by the passage of time. But if there is a living being in the cave abode, we have to be extra careful." The expressions of Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other heaven immortals fell instantly, while Taoist Qing Shen cried out in horror. What martial nephew Wuxia said is absolutely right. If there is a living being left in that cave abode, what is its cultivation base? Fellow Taoists, we have to be extra careful. Behind him, the emperors and ministers of six dynasties, and the elite disciples of two immortal sects, all had a shocked look on their faces. Patriarch Jiang Yun gave Wuxia a praising look again, then nodded and said, "My good disciple, you are more cautious than me." He glared fiercely at all the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect and snapped, "How old are you? Why are you not as meticulous as a new disciple?" Wuxia bowed his head, smiled and did not say a word. How could this be considered as meticulous? Clearly, it was because he had been a thief and underhand sect for too long, and he knew that some freakishly rich people liked to use living beings to guard all kinds of precious treasures in their safety deposit boxes. It was not the first or second time that he had encountered something like pulling out a handful of venomous snakes from a safety deposit box. As for the scroll of stealing, there were many things that Wuxia should pay attention to, one of which was the possibility of being guarded by living beings in the immortal abode. The shadowy figure who inherited Wuxia's scroll of stealing had once encountered an ancient divine beast, a three-headed black qilin, in the treasure vault of an almighty expert, and was chased by that beast for 3 years without being able to escape. When Patriarch Jiang Yun praised Wuxia, all the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect just bowed and listened to him. On the other hand, the faces of some people from Great Yen, Great Chu, and Great Wei turned slightly unsightly. They stared coldly at Wuqi's body. They had some opinions about Wuxia, who had robbed them of their glory. Wuxia could sense these hostile gazes, but he did not mind them at all. Before 1 or 2 heaven immortals appeared among the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties, Wuxia had no fear. Even if heaven immortals were to appear, they had to be able to transcend their heavenly tribulations. Wuxia had no interest in helping these people transcend their heavenly tribulations, but when some people whom he did not like were transcending their heavenly tribulations, Wuxia was very interested in giving them some troubles. In the scroll of stealing, there were all kinds of mystic techniques that could create troubles. For example, when one was at the most critical moment of transcending one's heavenly tribulation, one could be sprinkled with a large amount of drunken dragon incense. With that, one would not even know how one died. Thinking of this, Wuxia could not help but turn his head and grinned at those people. Sure enough, he saw Lu Buwei, Xiangyu, and a few others slowly turn their heads and look to the side. The cloud moved at a high speed, and very soon, the company arrived above the silver spot in the middle of the lake. At the order of Patriarch Jiang Yin and Qing Xian, the company descended onto the cloud. Using an incantation gesture, Patriarch Jiang Yin parted the lake water, then stepped on the cloud and flew down through the water channel. Once they started moving, they could immediately see the differences in this large group of people. Naturally, the 6 heaven immortals flew at the front, while Wuxia, who was favored by the 3 patriarchs of White Cloud Immortal Sect, followed closely behind them. Behind the 6 heaven immortals were the disciples of 2 immortal sects, who lined up neatly and flew in a strict formation. According to their cultivation base, specialties, and the characteristics of their magical treasures, they formed 2 formations that could both attack and defend as they flew down. Vaguely, an eerie aura could be sensed from them. As for the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties, they did not form a formation like the disciples of the immortal sections. They did have their own formation, but the 6 emperors stood at the front, while the civil and military ministers stood on the left and right. They flew in an orderly manner according to their positions and titles of nobility, and did not care about cultivation techniques, specialties, or the characteristics of their magical treasures. If such a formation were to arrive at Liyuan Galaxy, which was located outside Myriad Immortals' planet, and was suddenly attacked by an enemy, it would definitely be thrown into a panic, and nothing good would come out of it. However, the formation looked magnificent, and was a good way to put on a show. Very quickly, the company came to the deepest part of the lake. Before them was a jade-colored memorial arch, which was glistening and translucent, emitting a silver beam of light that pierced straight into the sky. On top of the memorial arch, there was a row of ancient seal script, which read Song Ao Immortal Abode. The material of the memorial arch was the finest cold fat jade, and it was nourished by a small energy vein underneath. After 2 eons of time, the memorial arch itself had transformed into a rare and precious treasure. Now the 200 feet tall memorial arch only had a thin layer of jade skin left on it, while the rest of the jade had turned into a clump of green silver, sticky jade essence that was hovering in the middle of the memorial arch. After 2 great calamities, over 10 billion years, the amount of natural energy accumulated in the jade marrow was shockingly enormous. The dense natural energy was so dense that it seemed to be bursting out from the bottom of the lake, turning the bottom of the lake with a circumference of 100 miles into a paradise filled with abundant natural energy. Patriarch Jiang Yun and Qing Xian exchanged a glance. Suddenly, both of them stretched out their right hands and began playing a finger-guessing game. After 3 rounds, Patriarch Jiang Yun was the winner while laughing out loud. Immediately, the memorial arch belonged to White Cloud Immortal Sect. The old Taoist Qing Xian slapped his right hand fiercely a few times while cursing, as if he was blaming himself for being so useless and throwing away such an extraordinary treasure. Wuxia and the others were struck dumb by what they saw. How could this be possible? How could a rare and precious treasure be owned by someone like that? On the other hand, the disciples of both immortal sects turned a blind eye to it, as if it was not the first time these 2 ancestral masters played this game. Noticing the puzzled look on Wuqi's face, Qing Wu Immortal transmitted her voice to Wuqi and said, Jiang Yun and Qing Xian are true brothers who have gone through life and death together. The 4 of them have been cultivating the Tao together, traveling the world together, and have been friends for nearly 100,000 years. For 100,000 years, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect have supported each other. And that's why they are able to hold up a piece of heaven and earth in Liyuan Galaxy. You don't have to be so courteous with Tranquil Vimla Sect. It's the same for them to us. Wuqi gave Patriarch Jiang Yun, Qing Xian and Qing Xian an envious look. It was really amazing that such a friendship could last for nearly 100,000 years without being affected by any external factors. When he was still on Earth, he had seen too many brave and righteous men, who would stab their brothers in life and death, dozens of times in the back just for a piece of bread, causing their brothers in life and death to die tragically on the spot. After the ownership of the Spirit Jade Arch was decided, all 6 Heaven Immortals exchanged a glance. Patriarch Jiang Yun unleashed the White Cloud Sky-Veiling Flag, covering all the people behind him with it. Layers of white clouds wheeled around him as he smiled and said, Today, we are fated to enter the Immortal Abode. If there are dangers lurking in the Immortal Abode, you must come out quickly and run for your lives. If there are not too many dangers in the Immortal Abode, you can try your luck. If you can find 1 or 2 immortal items, according to the sect rules, they will belong to you. According to the sect rules, if you can find 3 or more treasures of the same grade, you will have to hand them over to the sect. Do you understand? Wuqi was taken aback, while Yen Dan and the others looked at Patriarch Jiang Yun with great astonishment. The sect rules of White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect were extremely lax. Even if a disciple of Hotian realm found 2 immortal items in the abode, they would belong to that disciple as well. A sect rule like this was simply. Wuqi took a deep breath and nodded his head inwardly. It looked like he had hit the jackpot, as he had bumped into a pretty good sect. If he found something good in the future, he would not have to hide it all the time. Rubbing the 2 rings on his finger, Wuqi turned and gave Lu Buwei a grin. Lu Buwei gave Wuqi a look with a smile on his face and nodded slowly. 6 Heaven Immortal Patriarchs waved their right hands at the same time, unleashing 6 immortal thunderbolts. The arch in front of them shook abruptly, and in an instant, a door glinting brilliantly was opened up. A large sheet of dense immortal energy came rolling and rolling toward them. Wuqi and the others felt as if they had just drunk some strong wine, and their heads were dizzy, nearly passing out from the shock. Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out hastily, All disciples below the realm of nascent divinity, hold your breaths. The immortal energy is not something you can handle right now. Disciples of nascent divinity realm, remember this. Look into your body with your divine will. When your nascent divinity absorbs the immortal energy and emits a golden gleam, do not absorb any more, or you will face the risk of having your body explode. Upon hearing Patriarch Jiang Yun's words, Wuqi quickly held his breath. However, the Tenjin Dan and his 7 stealing heaven meridians began to devour the immortal energy hovering on the surface of his body, like hungry wolves. Wuqi was startled at first, then struck with wild joy. Chapter 296. Amidst the immortal aura that looked like white clouds, Wuqi was sitting cross-legged under a luxuriant 7 berries fig tree, exercising the 7 foundation establishment technique with all his might and crazily absorbing the immortal aura from the outside world. Within the meridians in both of his arms, 10 Jin Dan shone brilliantly and had grown to the size of a chicken. The Jin Dan was extremely solid, with large sheets of 5-colored auspicious lights coiling around it. An enormous amount of immortal aura was being absorbed and spat out from the Jin Dan, quickly transforming into innate energies that circulated around his body. The immortal aura was a kind of immortal aura that only immortals could absorb and use. Its nature was comparable to the Jin Dan nectar, and the nascent soul purple energy, which were regarded as the life of nascent soul cultivators. The energy contained in a single thread of immortal aura was equal to 10,000 units of acquired energies of 5 elements. It was a pure and overbearing energy. Unless one had the body of a heaven immortal, once any other cultivator absorbed it into their body would explode and they would die for sure. Only nascent divinity cultivators, who had half a foot into the door of heaven immortal, could absorb a little bit of immortal aura to temper their nascent divinity. However, the 10 Jin Dan that Wuxia condensed with the 7 foundation establishment technique could absorb the immortal aura without any limitation. On top of that, only 100 units of immortal aura could be transformed into 1 unit of innate energies through his Jin Dan. The nature of the innate energies now was at least 100 times purer than before, and contained an incredible life force and immense divine power. After being nourished by the innate energies, Wuxia was like a butterfly in a cocoon, and his body began to go through a tremendous transformation. Sitting cross-legged, the muscles on Wuxia's body were wriggling at an incredible speed, while his bones and internal organs were rubbing against each other and producing crisp popping noises. About 4 hours later, Wuxia suddenly fished out a golden vat filled with dragon blood essence from the black dragon spirit ring. Like a whale sucking in water, Wuxia took a deep breath towards the golden vat. Tens of thousands of kilograms of blood essence transformed into a long beam of light and was quickly swallowed by him. While circulating the 7 foundation establishment technique at top speed, he was also using the dragon transformation script to temper his fleshly body. Abruptly, a high-temperature heat wave burst out from his body, as a large amount of pitch-black and sticky filth sprayed out from the surface of his skin. In just a blink of an eye, a thick layer of filth had covered his entire body. The 10 Jin Dan in his 7 stealing heaven meridians continued to spin. Because of the nourishment from the immortal energies, the Jin Dan quickly expanded to the size of a fist, and then was forcibly compressed and quenched by Wuxia using a mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing. With each round of compression and quenching, the innate energies of 5 elements that burst out from the Jin Dan would become purer and denser. When Wuxia had compressed and quenched the Jin Dan for the 9th time, the innate energies of 5 elements that burst out from the Jin Dan had reached a level comparable to the energy of an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Cracking noises could be heard from all over his body, as Wuxia's body expanded and shrunk abruptly. After the 9th round of compression and expansion, the filth on Wuxia's skin suddenly exploded, and the layer of skin on his body cracked, revealing a new layer of skin that was as fair as jade and smooth as suet. Wuxia snorted coldly, then casually clenched his fist and thrust it forward. Vaguely, a 5-colored ray could be seen flickering on his 5 fingers, then abruptly condensed into his palm, transforming into a tiny purple-gold lightning bolt that shot out from his palm. A loud boom rang out, as a 100-feet-tall fence made from celestial dark iron, that had lived for over 100 million years shattered into pieces. The broken fence flew up into the air, and was melted into molten iron by the extremely high temperature contained in the lightning bolt. The celestial dark iron was as tough as an upper-grade defensive magical treasure, but it was shattered into pieces by Wuxia with just a single palm thunder. It was not hard to tell how powerful his innate energies of 5 elements had become. Wonderful. Wuxia let out a long laugh. Suddenly, his soul and his spiritual ocean transformed into a ball of misty light, and quickly rushed into his Jin Dan, which was located in his 7 stealing heaven meridians. His soul was divided into 10 equal parts and fused with 10 Jin Dan. Immediately, his thumb-sized purple-gold Jin Dan burst out with a blinding light. On the smooth surface of each Jin Dan, countless images of Wuxia were seen wheeling at high speed, looking extremely mystical. The immortal energy is indeed much stronger than the ordinary natural energies. Only those who cultivate the scroll of stealing can use the immortal energy to cultivate in the Jin Dan realm. Wuqi thought to himself proudly. Jin Dan is a unity deity, and the soul is contained within the soul. This is the cultivation base of the middle stage of Jin Dan realm. Shaking his neck, Wuqi was about to absorb more immortal energy, trying to push his cultivation base to the peak of Jin Dan realm. However, right when he circulated the innate energies of 5 elements in his body, countless wounds suddenly burst open on both of his arms. Wuqi felt helpless, and he had to stop his attempt. Currently, his innate energies of 5 elements were extremely powerful, and had exceeded the limit of his fleshly body. He had to go through a long period of arduous cultivation to strengthen the foundation of his fleshly body. Only then could he improve his cultivation base again. The scroll of stealing focused on the foundation, and without a strong foundation, his future achievements would be limited. Wuqi felt helpless, and he could only let the Jin Dan keep absorbing innate energies of 5 elements to strengthen his fleshly body. Together with the dragon transformation script, the strength of his fleshly body was gradually increasing. Now that he had reached the middle stage of Jin Dan realm, his soul had fused with the Jin Dan, and the Jin Dan had given birth to its own intelligence. The energies in his body were constantly circulating. In the future, his cultivation base would progress at a tremendous pace, much faster than before. He rose to his feet, casually plucked 2 fruits from the 7 seeds fig tree and ate them. After that, Wuqi gave the surroundings a casual glance. 1 month ago, when Wuqi and the company carefully entered the Tsang-Ao immortal abode, they were suddenly enveloped by an auspicious cloud that emerged from the ground, and all of them were thrown to different places in the immortal abode. Wuqi was quite lucky, as he was thrown to a garden of flowers and fruits in the immortal abode. This place was filled with an abundance of immortal energies, and countless flowers, fruit trees, and rare spirit herbs were planted here. Wuqi was more than happy to stay here and focus on his cultivation. With the help of the nearly endless immortal energies, he pushed his cultivation base to the middle stage of Jin Dan realm, where the Jin Dan had fused with his soul. Fortunately, the immortal energies in this immortal abode were endless. If Wuqi wanted to achieve his current cultivation base by relying on the ordinary natural energies in the outside world, it would take him at least 1,000 years of hard work. After all, the energy contained in 1 portion of immortal energies was equal to 10,000 portions of ordinary natural energies. Tsang-Ao immortal abode had accumulated the immortal energies for 2 great epochs, and no one had ever used them before. That was why Wuqi was able to use them wantonly. After letting out a loud laugh, Wuqi's eyes shone with a bright gleam, and he exercised the mystic eyes of universe with all his might. In an instant, all the restrictive spells in the garden, which measured about 1,000 acres in circumference, were completely exposed in his eyes. With his cultivation base suddenly improved by 1 level, the power of all the divine abilities and mystic techniques of Wuqi had increased by more than 10 times. Every single herb and fruit tree in this garden was protected by restrictive spells. However, the strength of these restrictive spells was not strong, and they were not mainly used for attacking, but mainly used to maintain a constant temperature and humidity. After finding out the root of these restrictive spells, Wuqi carefully came to the center of the garden, to a white jade field that measured about 1 acre in circumference. This white garden was paved with the finest white jade, and only a few dozen purple grasses were planted in the field, which was several tens of feet thick. The grasses were shaped like calamus, and their stems and leaves were stretched out like ribbons, swaying gently amidst the white immortal energies even though there was no wind. A few fist-sized golden fruits were growing on top of the grasses. Each of these fruits was shaped like a human brain, and were emitting a dazzling and strange gleam. Heavenly wit fruit. Wuqi narrowed his eyes into 2 thin lines. It was an extremely rare spirit herb. It was a spirit fruit that could awaken the intellect of any human or animal, giving them an incredible intelligence. Each spirit fruit could only be eaten once by a person, and if the person consumed too much, his brain would be burned by the heavenly flame, turning it into ashes and killing him. A single spirit fruit could create an existence with a superhuman intelligence, and at the same time, it could enhance that person's ability to sense the Tao of heaven and earth by at least 3 to 10 times. The higher the innate intelligence of a person was, the greater the enhancement would be. And the most fundamental cultivation base of a cultivator was the understanding of the Tao of heaven and earth. A single heavenly wit fruit could enhance one's ability to sense by at least 3 times, which meant it could save 3 times the time of cultivation. Patriarch Jiang Yun had been cultivating arduously for nearly 100,000 years, but he was only very close to the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal. If he could consume a single heavenly wit fruit, even if it could only save him 3 times the time, he should have been able to advance to the next realm 70,000 years ago. There were 18 heavenly wit grasses here, and a total of 57 heavenly wit fruits. There was also a large area of residue of the heavenly wit fruit on the ground. Apparently, there were countless ripening heavenly wit fruits here, but no one picked them, and eventually, they all withered by themselves. After a moment of silence, Wuxia plucked all the heavenly wit fruits and swallowed one of them. After exercising his cultivation technique and regulating his breath for 15 minutes, Wuxia finally digested the powerful medicinal strength of the heavenly wit fruit. As expected, he felt that his eyes and ears had become sharper, as if his body had melted and fused with the surrounding heaven and earth. His communication with the heaven and earth had been enhanced in a very mysterious way. After putting away the other 56 heavenly wit fruits into a jade box, Wuxia looked at the remaining spirit herbs and shook his head. The spirit herbs ripened once in 36,000 years, and they had to grow in a place with an abundance of immortal energy. As of now, Wuxia did not have an immortal abode for him to use, and even if he managed to transplant them, they would wither and die. After plucking all the ready-made heavenly wit fruits, whoever still wanted them would have to come back after 36,000 years. Next, Wuxia took out all the spirit herbs in the flower bed, either consuming them or plucking them. He had looted all the spirit herbs that caught his eye. As for some spirit herbs that could be transplanted, he also spent some effort and temporarily stored them in the spirit breeding ring. But too bad, the quality of the spirit breeding ring was not high enough, and it could not store immortal energy. Otherwise, Wuxia would really have the thought to loot the entire flower bed. After spending a few days of effort, he had looted everything that could be taken away. Suddenly, voices were heard coming from outside the main entrance of the flower bed. "Great General, there is a spirit seedling garden here." Upon hearing the voices, Wuxia rolled his eyes and twisted his body, transforming into a stream of yellow mist and plunging into the ground. Carefully avoiding some restrictive spells underground, Wuxia exercised the mystic eyes of universe to the fullest, following the direction of the few underground energy veins. Using the divine ability of searching for energy veins found in Scroll of Stealing, he headed straight towards the core of Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode, the spirit cave with the richest immortal energy. When passing by a small energy vein about 3 miles away from the spirit cave, Wuxia could clearly hear Patriarch Jiang Yun's voice coming from above his head. This is indeed an immortal abode of an ancient heaven immortal, as the restrictive spells here are indeed very mysterious. Fellow Taoists, let's work together and break this restrictive spell first. This is the treasure vault, and if you want to find something good, it should be here. Upon hearing that, Wuxia was secretly amused. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others were still breaking the restrictive spells? In his eyes, the restrictive spells left behind by an ancient heaven immortal were not very complicated. By using the innate earth element escape art, he could just travel underground and avoid a few crucial cores of the formation, and then he could easily go straight into the formation. Why would it be so troublesome? In fact, this formation was just an ordinary illusionary spirit formation, formed by combining 36 celestial dippers and 72 earthly evils. It was based on illusory techniques and supplemented by killing formations. Although it could be considered as a magical formation, without the control of its master, its power was just ordinary. Of course, it would be very difficult to break it from the front. However, it was too easy for Wuxia to sneak into the formation by following the energy veins underground. Shaking his head, Wuxia stealthily followed a small energy vein and plunged straight into the spirit cave. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.